Chapter 4158. It couldn't be helped. She had already waited for more than 4 hours, yet no one was willing to challenge her. Could it be that she had to keep her eyes open and count mushrooms until dawn? Haha. It was seriously too boring. Since no one challenged her, then she would go catch up on sleep. It was simply a waste of her excited anticipation to pass her days in such a boring manner. The little fatty couldn't resist sneaking a glance at Prince Mo beside him, only to see the latter's lips curled into a smile as his gaze circled that 9 stars mirroring the moon cauldron. His Highness probably felt that the little stoic's actions were extremely amusing. The little fatty inwardly ridiculed and rolled his eyes. Little did he know that the little stoic's actions were simply drawing hatred everywhere. At this moment, which academy disciple currently competing on the stage didn't gnash their teeth in hatred at the stoic face? She truly was a shameless little stoic. While others were fighting for their lives, she hid inside that cauldron and continued to slack off. The problem was that she could earn points automatically just by meditating on the spot. The points she earned in a day weren't the slightest bit inferior to others who diligently fought 10 matches in a row. How could they endure this? The little fatty and the others were actually well aware that the little girl wouldn't really seal herself inside that 9 stars mirroring the moon cauldron. She must have returned to Paradise Planet. Not only was the 9 stars mirroring the moon cauldron's defense extremely strong, it could also effectively isolate everyone's divine senses from infiltrating it. No matter how strong you were, all you would see after infiltrating the 9 stars mirroring the moon cauldron with divine senses was pitch black. It didn't matter to the little stoic that she returned to Paradise Planet to sleep and eat with peace of mind. Casually tossing a demonic eye outside the arena would allow her to clearly grasp all the movements in the arena outside. Sir Jojo was actually already tired after tossing and turning for a day and night. After washing up and returning to her treehouse, Miss Chiao hugged her pillow and quickly fell asleep comfortably. After she slept enough and got up, she ate some food and drank some spirit tea, feeling 100 times more energetic. Only then did the little girl appear inside the 9 stars mirroring the moon cauldron with great satisfaction. Just as she was about to open the 9 stars mirroring the moon cauldron, she heard the muffled sound of a heavy punch above her head. Student Xiaoming from Umbra Academy challenges Arena number 6. Student Arbor from the Royal School. Nuno Duo shouted excitedly. Even through the 9 stars mirroring the moon cauldron, Arbor could hear the loud applause outside. Many students from other academies were moved to tears when they saw that someone finally dared to challenge Arbor. That's great. Finally, someone fearlessly stepped onto the arena to challenge the young crown princess. Arbor lifted the red copper cauldron and waved his hand, summoning the cauldron back into his consciousness. Emolian looked at the little fellow's spirited face and swept away his previous weariness. She couldn't help but curl her lips into a smile. Only they knew that it had only been less than 2 hours since Jojo had released the cauldron. However, Lady Xiao Xiao should have already finished eating, washing up, and catching up on sleep. This troublesome child was now full of energy. How could he be the same as these cultivators who had been fighting nonstop for a day and a night? The little stoic washed her white academy uniform, dried it, and put it back on. She naturally wouldn't be so stupid as to change her clothes midway. Wouldn't this seem even more strange? Student Xiaoming from Umbra Academy, start the challenge. After Nuno screeched excitedly, the tall man named Xiaoming fiercely stomped the ground and charged toward her. Chapter 4159. When the little stoic saw this person summon a long saber and slash at her without a second word, her mood immediately brightened up. What a good man. It was a fight, so it should be straightforward like this and not waste words. This Xiaoming from Umbra Academy had a squarish face, and his attacks were swift and accurate. The spirit weapon in his hand was a broad saber that was 7 feet long. He brandished it in his hand, stirring up fierce gales that pounced at her. Arbor abruptly flashed and was already in front of Xiaoming. The startled swan dagger abruptly leaped out of her conscious and stabbed at the broad saber with a whoosh as swift as a clap of thunder. Clang, 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 clang. The broad saber and the short, agile dagger clashed several times, stirring up the nearby air to fluctuate incessantly. Whoosh! A beam of flame shot over, but it was deflected by Arbor's snow-colored silver needles with a flip of her hand. Those silver needles were forged from ice and snow, so they were naturally the little girl's water spirit power. She had fused with sacred wood, sacred water, and sacred earth for a long time, and now she could use them with a flip of her hand and do as she pleased. She didn't need to waste any effort to figure out what she wanted them to transform into, and simply raised her hand. Several soft, chi-chi-chi sounds were heard as the snow-refined silver needles abruptly shot toward Xiaoming's face after being lightly deflected by Arbor's slender hand. Xiaoming's expression didn't change, and he waved his hand to set up a partial defensive fire helmet in front of him. It blocked the attack of several silver needles. However, in the blink of an eye, several hundred snow-refined silver needles once again flew out simultaneously. This time, they split into 3 paths and rushed toward Xiaoming. Xiaoming promptly activated his defensive spirit weapon and erected a defensive wall in front of him. He heard a series of soft thuds. Countless snow-refined silver needles directly penetrated the defensive wall and shot toward his limbs and bones. Xiaoming didn't panic and immediately leaped down. His figure flipped back and forth in midair as he continuously struck out clusters of flames. Following a series of clanging sounds, countless snow-refined silver needles were rapidly sent flying by him. In the end, it had to be said that the shock in his heart spread even more. Was the little stoic casually unleashing an attack without expending any divine power at all? Although the two of them had not been fighting for a long time, the intensity of the battle was extremely high. Basically, they didn't stop, moving back and forth, competing with their own divine power. His fire spirit was completely unable to suppress his opponent's water spirit. Even before this, everyone knew that the little stoic was actually someone who possessed 2 types of spirit energy sources. The water spirit and the wood spirit seemed to be very powerful, so powerful that no one could tell what level they were. Xiaoming took a deep breath, thinking that it must be above the 8th level. Then, could it be the 9th level spirit water? Chi. After a light sound, Xiaoming suddenly felt a pain in his shoulder. Lowering his head to take a look, he saw a snow-refined silver needle made of water spirit piercing through his shoulder. The subtle but itchy feeling of being pricked by needles instantly numbed half of his arm. Hiss! Xiaoming sucked in a breath of cold air. He thought to himself, this girl's methods are truly terrifying. She can actually integrate some unknown poison into her own water spirit? If it was purely a water spirit's attack, it would at most hurt. Why would it produce such a strange, itchy feeling? Soon, Xiaoming's arm drooped down. However, his speed wasn't the slightest bit slow. He leaped into the air with a few leaps and punched down. Arbor's expression didn't change in the slightest. He waved his hand, and a wisp of fine yellow sand covered the sky and rolled up. Chapter 40-160. The boundless yellow sand rapidly transformed into a giant rock and blocked Xiaoming's punch. Xiaoming's attack landed on the giant rock, but it didn't even leave a dent on it. His pupils constricted as a huge force hit him in the face and sent him flying half a meter away. His feet dragged out 2 white marks on the ground as he barely managed to stabilize his body. A sweet and fishy taste surged up his throat. He tried many times but failed to suppress it, and a wisp of blood flowed down the corner of his mouth. It was obvious that his meridians were injured. Both inside and outside the arena were dead silent. Everyone looked at the little girl in front of them as if they were looking at a little monster. Earth spirit? It turned out that this stoic face didn't only control 2 types of spirit energy. This earth spirit, water spirit, and wood spirit. She actually controlled 3 out of the 5 spirits. Xiaoming took a deep breath and cupped his hands slightly. He took a step back and said, "Your Excellency's skills are impressive." This one admits defeat wholeheartedly. Arbor blinked and looked at Xiaoming from Shadow Academy. He nodded and gestured for him to do as he pleased. This punk was a straightforward person and straightforwardly admitted his loss. This made the little stoic feel that this punk's character wasn't bad. The little fellow hated people who acted coy and pretentious the most. After losing, they acted as if the whole world had let them down and insisted on nagging her. It was simply annoying. Meanwhile, over at Shadow Academy, the atmosphere was very gloomy. Zhao Yi, who was sitting next to Mu Xiaoxue, sneered with a cold face. Look at how impressive the Second City Lord's disciple is. Nothing much has happened yet, but he's already admitted defeat. Mu Xiaoxue was staring at the stage without blinking. After a while, she let out a long sigh and said in a very gentle voice, "This crown princess is truly impressive." No wonder. Last time in the Phoenixwood Forest, senior brother Gu also suffered such a big loss in her hands. A trace of mockery flitted through Zhao Yi's eyes. He turned around and glanced at the pretentious Gu Yixuan sitting next to junior sister Xiao Shui in disgust. This Gu Yixuan came to the City of Shadows to become a disciple with bad intentions. Because of junior sister Xiao Shui's help, he was actually accepted as a disciple by Master. During this period of time, he had actually made a name for himself in the City of Shadows as a newcomer. Moreover, for this person, Master had specially made a trip to Medicine King Island to ask for medicine to treat external injuries. Thinking of this, Zhao Yi's eyes once again flashed with a haze, and his expression was extremely gloomy. Why would junior sister Xiao Shui fancy such a trash? How many level 10 soul masters were there in the City of Shadows? Why would junior sister look at this brat in a different light? The Gu family was not one of the top aristocratic families in Dragon Flame City. At best, it could only be considered a second-class aristocratic family. In front of the City of Shadows, their forces were no more than ants. Mu Xiaoxue's lips curled into a faint smile. Her eyes seemed to glow with 5 different colors, filled with longing. Senior Martial Brother Zhao, that crown princess is really amazing. Even senior brother Qiu is no match for her. Why should Xiao Shui worship such a rude and unreasonable woman? Zhao Yi snorted disdainfully. A woman should be like junior sister Xiao Shui, elegant and gentle. What's wrong with fighting and killing all day long? Lin Jiner, who was sitting next to Zhao Yi, could not help but stiffen. Mu Xiaoxue hurriedly pulled Zhao Yi's sleeve and said softly, "Senior Martial Brother Zhao, don't say that." Chapter 40-161. It would be great if Xiaoxue could activate her mystic meridians. She heaved a long sigh as her eyes wandered. It's a pity that Xiaoxue is useless. Zhao Yi hurriedly comforted her in a gentle voice, while Gu Yixuan turned to smile at Mu Xiaoxue and said, "Junior sister, there is no need to belittle yourself." Although junior sister does not have a cultivation base, she is an expert in the art of mechanisms and is familiar with all kinds of array formations. In terms of studying ancient books, you can firmly surpass others. Indeed. Gu Yixuan nodded with a smile. Zhao Yi glanced at him. Although Gu Yixuan nodded in agreement, Zhao Yi still felt uncomfortable in his heart. Knitting his brows, his gaze suddenly shifted downwards. Has junior brother Gu's leg injury really healed? Many thanks for senior brother's concern. Gu Yixuan smiled faintly, revealing the demeanor of a gentle young master. Fortunately, Master went to Medicine King Valley to ask for medicine for me. Gu Yixuan smiled. Otherwise, my injury wouldn't have healed so quickly. Zhao Yi made a sound of agreement as a trace of mockery surfaced in his eyes. Gu Yixuan was caught in the Phoenixwood Forest's array formation and was scratched by the skeletal arm. Unexpectedly, 5 thin black fingerprints were left behind. He had been poisoned by the rotting corpse. No wonder he had set his eyes on his junior sister. If it wasn't for his desire to enter the City of Shadows, Gu Yixuan would have died long ago. Thinking of this, Zhao Yi turned to sneer at Gu Yixuan. Junior brother Gu, you've been in our City of Shadows for quite some time. How about it, do you want to fight in the arena? Fight for our Shadow Academy's glory. Zhao Yi said with a fake smile. Gu Yixuan didn't panic at all. He only looked up at Zhao Yi and said with a smile, "Senior brother, Zhao must be joking. I admit that my strength is inferior to senior brother Qiu's." Even senior brother Qiu was defeated. How can I defeat that stoic-faced crown princess? He said this, but there was nothing to be embarrassed about. After all, Qiuming's cultivation was indeed much higher than his. Even Qiuming had been defeated by the little stoic, so why should he, Gu Yishuan, stupidly go up and invite humiliation? Hearing this, Mu Xiaoxue also smiled and said, Senior Brother Zhao, don't make things difficult for Senior Brother Gu. Senior Apprentice Brother Gu is new here, so there are many things you don't know. Mu Xiaoxue's gentle and considerate consolation drew a grateful look from Gu Yishuan. He only felt that the Miss Xiaoxue in front of him had an elegant appearance and a very gentle and generous personality. Compared to the little stoic who would make fun of people at the slightest disagreement, they were truly people from a completely different world. How could a terrifying woman like the little stoic girl compare to a strand of his junior sister Xiao Shue's hair? The more he looked at Miss Imo, the more unbearable his heart palpitated. His decision to seek refuge in the City of Shadows due to the corpse poison on his ankle was indeed the best decision he had ever made in his life. Gu Yishuan smiled and nodded at Mu Xiaoxue. When she turned her gaze back to the arena, she happened to see Qiuming slowly walking over to the Shadow Academy area. As soon as Qiuming appeared, several Shadow Academy students couldn't resist glancing at him, and there was no lack of mocking and ridiculing words among them. Qiuming ignored all of them and calmly returned to his seat. And at this time, the little stoic on the arena had quieted down again. She sat cross-legged in the center of arena number 6 and expressionlessly watched the fight on the opposite arena. That's right, it was Qi Nan on arena number 3. This punk was almost at his limit. Chapter 40-162. The pitiful brat lasted for less than 2 hours and was about to be killed by the continuous spinning. Sure enough, different people had different fates. Arbor sat there and looked at the unlucky brat on arena number 3 with a melon-eating face. Suddenly, her small hand moved, and everyone watched speechlessly as this guy fished out a bag of candied melon seeds from his inner world. She sat there cross-legged and didn't need to recover at all. She just hugged a bag of snacks and ate them with relish while watching the intense fight on the arena. When she was thirsty from eating snacks, she took out a bamboo tube filled with spirit tea and drank a mouthful. Her black, beady eyes moved nimbly back and forth between the two people fighting to the death on arena number 3. Qi Nan reached out to feel for the talisman in his sleeve, but he seemed to have touched nothing, and his entire body stiffened for 3 seconds. And at this time, his opponent pounced on him and slapped Qi Nan's chest. Qi Nan seemed to have suffered a serious injury, and a trace of blood gushed out of his mouth with a poof. His opponent's eyes became increasingly bright like stars. Presumably, he thought that Qi Nan was about to run out of luck. He wouldn't be able to withstand his attacks very soon. Just as he leaped up and abruptly charged in Qi Nan's direction, Qi Nan suddenly raised his right hand, and an explosion talisman landed on his opponent's face with a bang. After a thunderous boom, Qi Nan's opponent clutched his face and howled miserably and tragically. His entire body fell to the ground and rolled back and forth on the arena. Qi Nan stared at his defeated opponent with a sneer on his face as he proudly stood on the arena. The originally heroic youth had a high-spirited appearance. He had won in adversity, fought together for so long, and was still able to single-handedly turn the tide. If this got out, it would naturally be a beautiful story. But for some reason, when he glanced at the little stoic eating while expressionlessly watching his show, Qi Nan felt his balls ache for no reason. Why the hell did he have an impulse to violently beat up the stoic face in the depths of his heart? What was going on with her being so calm and unruffled, eating and watching the show? They were both defending the arena. As the champion, why did he look so much more miserable than her? How could this be? Zhao Yi from the Dark Shadow Academy challenges the champion of arena number 3, Qi Nan. As the voice fell, Zhao Yi's figure flashed past the crowd's eyes and steadily jumped onto the third ring. Qi Nan's expression changed completely. I request to use the ringmaster's immunity expedient. I'm sorry, student Qi Nan. You've already used up your 3 chances of exemption. Qi Nan's face immediately turned ashen. Damn it, this man from the Shadow Academy called Zhao Yi, he was actually so shameless. He was waiting for the moment when his body was on the verge of collapse to rush up and fight with him. The little stoic suddenly raised her small hand, specially supplied with a bottle of spirit recovery medicinal liquid. After drinking one bottle, he would be able to recover 100% of his spiritual power. 2 million spirit coins per bottle. Do you want it? Everyone's heart, which had been calm when they saw her, was suddenly filled with a huge wave of emotions. All of them were cursing in their hearts, yet Chi Nan immediately nodded and said without a trace of hesitation, "I'll buy it." He was freaking going all out. Although he didn't know if this specially supplied spirit recovery medicinal liquid was as effective as the little stoic said. But outside, I found a lousy computer to write on until my hands hurt. #, I'll make up 2 chapters tomorrow. Chapter 4163. But, in any case, there was at least some hope, right? Moreover, he had only lost once. Under everyone's watchful eyes, the little crown princess probably wouldn't deceive him. Let's gamble. Chi Nan waved his hand. With a swish, he casually threw over a small brocade pouch filled with spirit coins. The little stoic grabbed that pouch of spirit coins and then tossed him a bottle of spirit-restoring medicinal liquid. Chi Nan gripped the spirit-restoring medicinal liquid tightly and uncorked the bottle without hesitation, draining it in one gulp. Everyone, what kind of situation was this? Why did they feel like the scene had become a bit dramatic? The champion of Arena number 6 threw a bottle of spirit-restoring medicinal liquid to the champion of Arena number 3. They had a common enemy. Shadow Academy's Zhao Yi's face was filled with cold fury. A mocking smirk even surfaced on his lips. What kind of spirit-restoring medicinal liquid could fully recover all of one's spiritual energy? Even if it was a godly spirit-restoring medicinal liquid, it still required time to regulate and recover, right? That was why this girl was simply indulging in wild fantasies and telling lies. Arbor simply ignored the disdain in Zhao Yi's eyes. Ignorant and ill-informed people always lived in their own world, always thinking that what they couldn't do, others definitely couldn't either. There was naturally nothing to say to such people. Zhao Yi retracted his gaze, and his cold gaze landed on Chi Nan. This Zhangzhou talisman patrician family's main disciple was said to be second only to the Qi family's 8th young master. Even if his cultivation wasn't the most outstanding, ordinary people simply couldn't do anything to him when paired with his yellow-level talisman practitioner combat strength. However, mockery flitted across Zhao Yi's eyes. How could an arrow at the end of its flight defeat him? Zhao Yi swiftly pulled out a gray iron sword and slashed it at Chi Nan without a second word. What kind of joke was this? How could he give Chi Nan the time to consume spirit medicine and slowly recover? In Zhao Yi's opinion, Chi Nan's 2 million was simply a joke, a waste of money.
What?
Zhao Yi's expression stiffened slightly, and a sudden change flashed across his expression. Chi Nan's incoming sword strike was incomparably swift, so fast that he simply couldn't react in time. In the blink of an eye, the spiritual energy that Chi Nan had gathered with her sword suddenly appeared in front of him.
Quick.
It was so fast that Zhao Yi thought his eyes were playing tricks on him. After all, Chi Nan's spiritual power and physical strength were almost at their limits after going through a series of battles. The speed at which he drew his sword naturally couldn't be compared to when he was in high spirits when he first set up the arena.
But now,
Chi Nan actually recovered swiftly under everyone's watchful eyes. How was this possible? Zhao Yi expressed that he simply could not understand. Chi Nan caught the medicinal liquid the little stoic tossed over. It hadn't been more than a minute since she took it. He recovered just like that? Zhao Yi dodged Chi Nan's sword attack and sneered. Chi Nan, I think you've really lost your mind. What kind of medicine do you think that stoic face can give you? How can a medicinal liquid that can instantly restore your body be anything good? It must be an evil item. Don't take it too hard now. When the competition is over, you'll lose all your power and your cultivation. That'll be fun. When Chi Nan heard this, her entire body couldn't help but tremble slightly. Zhao Yi's nonsense truly struck a chord in her heart. Other people definitely didn't experience it as thoroughly as the person involved. This bottle of spirit-restoring medicinal liquid. Chapter 4164. It was truly miraculous. After he ingested it, he could feel his depleted spiritual energy being endlessly regenerated from his dantian within a few minutes. His entire body seemed to be soaked in a hot spring, emitting a cool and refreshing warmth. Chi-Nan cast a shocked glance at Arbor, but the little girl only glanced at him indifferently, then continued to drink tea and eat snacks. What a pain in the ass. What exactly was she trying to express with that glance? Was there something wrong or nothing wrong? Chi-Nan waved her hand to parry Zhao Yi's sword, but she was muttering in her heart. Unexpectedly, the power of this sword was so great that it almost knocked the flying sword out of Zhao Yi's hand. Zhao Yi's expression instantly became extremely unsightly. He didn't expect that when he went on stage to challenge a person whose spiritual energy was on the verge of depletion, the result would be unsatisfactory. Of course, all of this was caused by the stoic face. If it weren't for that stoic face's superfluous act of selling a bottle of spirit-returning medicinal liquid to Chi-Nan, Chi-Nan would have already been thrown off the stage by him. The points that Chi-Nan had previously earned should have all been inherited by him. Despicable, despicable stoic face, despicable to the extreme. While Zhao Yi was bewildered, the gray iron sword in his hand continuously slashed and stabbed at Chi-Nan. He truly forced Chi-Nan to the edge of the stage. Now he could only resort to trickery to win. When Gu Yixuan saw this, a faint trace of mockery flitted across the corner of his eyes. Mu Xiaoxue sat next to him, tightly wringing the handkerchief in her hand, and said softly, "Will senior sect brother Zhao be okay? Why does it seem like he's slowing down?" Even an ordinary woman without any cultivation could see that Zhao Yi was at a disadvantage in Chi-Nan's hands. How could the other cultivators not see it? Below the stage, more than half of the people looked at the lively Chi-Nan with measuring gazes. More than half of the people looked at the young crown princess, who was sitting upright and still, as if they were looking at a weirdo.
Terrifying.
What kind of medicinal liquid did the young crown princess have in her hands? How could a guy who was like a drowning dog be instantly transformed into a dragon, a tiger, and a tiger in high spirits after drinking a bottle of it? But the young crown prince consort was still expressionless. When she saw some people glancing at her, she completely ignored them. After eating and drinking his fill, he put away the food and closed his eyes to meditate. She actually didn't need to adjust her breathing, nor did she need to recover. For a person who had been idle for 2 to 4 hours without anyone challenging him, he was so idle that he could just sit there and count mushrooms. Since he had nothing to do, he might as well go into seclusion and cultivate. After all, he blocked his 5 senses and 6 senses. After entering seclusion, the surroundings were no longer as noisy. It was too noisy. This group of people was like a bunch of idiots. They were going to compete here for 7 days and 7 nights, and they weren't even allowed to leave for a meal during this period. The competition itself was simply sick. At this moment, a student from the royal school could not help but cry out, "Hey, look at that young Master Qi. Aren't his attacks getting faster and faster?" Yes, yes. Amazing. The Crown Princess's bottle of spiritual revitalization medicinal liquid worth 2 million spirit coins is really worth it. Not only was it worth it, it was simply a great discount. If it was a life and death struggle, think about it. How much of a change would this bottle of spiritual revitalization medicinal liquid bring to the entire battle situation? Chapter 4165. Only now did everyone know that the little crown princess was actually helping that Chi-Nan. They couldn't help but secretly criticize her in their hearts. The little crown princess really did things as she pleased. They heard that their talisman aristocratic family and Tsang State's Qi family competed with each other, and there were quite a few disdainful existences. They didn't expect the little crown princess never played her cards according to the rules. She casually helped whoever she saw pleasing to the eye, and whoever she didn't see pleasing to the eye, for example, this Zhao Yi. They really didn't know how Zhao Yi had offended this little devil to be treated like this. The onlookers couldn't help but feel a faint sadness for Zhao Yi. They originally thought that they would be able to pick up a big loss on the stage, but who knew that the opponent would become more and more courageous, and now he was almost forced to the edge of the stage. The current Qi Nan was indeed becoming more and more courageous as she fought, indescribably brave. He no longer had any doubts about the bottle of medicinal liquid that the little crown princess gave him before. How could such an excellent spirit-restoring medicinal liquid be poisonous? Your whole family is poisonous. This spirit-restoring medicinal liquid was simply a miracle. It must be the work of a pharmaceutical genius. It definitely couldn't escape. Because Qi Nan discovered that after drinking this medicinal liquid, not only did it replenish all of his spiritual power within minutes. What was even more frightening was it was endlessly replenishing his spiritual power. He calculated the time. It had already been more than half a quarter of an hour. But the spirit-restoring medicinal liquid was still working. No matter how much spiritual power he consumed, it had been slowly replenishing him. Although the speed of replenishing spiritual power wasn't as stunning as the first one-time recovery, it was a slow replenishment of spiritual power. Which spirit-restoring medicinal liquid could do this? In any case, he hadn't seen it in any of the pill stores in Song State. He also didn't know how long the spirit-restoring medicinal liquid would last this time, and he felt extremely curious. Dean, look. The beautiful teacher from Joei Academy couldn't help but frown, turning her head to say to Li Xiangbei, "That student Qi Nan's spiritual power seems to be increasing. What's going on?" Li Xiangbei's face had been taut all this time. As if he had thought of something, his whole face darkened a little. "It's that bottle of medicinal liquid's problem." Li Xiangbei couldn't help but look at Dean Yun, who was sitting with his back to him. Did this Dean already know from the start that this little girl actually had a very powerful medicinal liquid in her hands? Then, wouldn't the other royal academies also have this type of medicinal liquid? Oh no. A bottle of medicinal liquid cost 2 million spirit coins. It seemed that not many people could afford it. Furthermore, alchemists needed a long time to refine pills. To be able to concoct such a heaven-defying medicinal liquid, it would naturally take a very long time. Li Xiangbei muttered to himself, feeling that he must have hit the nail on the head. How could he have known that the little stoic could mass-produce a lot of this spirit-restoring medicinal fluid in minutes? Moreover, it didn't require many special herbs. To make this kind of spirit-restoring medicinal liquid, it was all made from ordinary medicinal herbs. The cost was only a few spirit coins. The most special thing was probably the drop of holy water from the little water child. As for the holy water, she could get as much as she wanted. She didn't need to worry too much about it. As a result, everyone felt that the little stoic's spiritual medicinal liquid this time was very high-end. With such a high price, it must be difficult to produce. But in the end, that's not the case at all. In the little girl's opinion, these people of the secular world were indeed somewhat foolish. Do you think that the higher the price, the better the medicinal properties? Chapter 4166. Who told them that those good pills and elixirs required heaven rank and above medicinal herbs to concoct? In reality, the Stoic face used intermediate rank medicinal herbs the most when concocting pills and elixirs. In the past, there were many medicinal herbs planted on Paradise Planet and Chuyan Planet. But now Forest Planet was overwhelming, and they had almost everything they could think of. Unless it was extremely rare, Forest Planet might not have it. Well, everyone vied for discussion. Qi Nan took out an attack talisman from her sleeve and stuck it to Zhao Yi's shoulder. After a crisp bang, everyone saw that Zhao Yi was sent flying by the attack talisman. Everyone involuntarily clicked their tongues. How rare! Zhao Yi, this punk, happily went up the stage, but in the end, he was sent flying so pathetically. This was all thanks to a bottle of spirit-returning medicinal liquid provided by the little girl. At this time, everyone's gazes involuntarily landed on the little stoic, and they all looked at her incredulously. This little stoic crown princess was too amazing. I heard that the crown princess is a very remarkable pill master. Indeed, Her Majesty the Empress of the Divine Province, who had been in a coma for many years, was also treated by the Crown Princess. So you mean that the Crown Princess was the one who concocted that bottle of spirit-returning medicinal liquid? The person who raised this question had a surprised expression on his face. However, the people around him all cast him disdainful gazes. Ignorant and ill-informed. Could it be that you haven't heard that Her Majesty the Empress of the Divine Province was treated by the Crown Princess and that His Majesty issued a general amnesty because of this? That person rubbed his nose in embarrassment. He indeed didn't know about this matter. After all, as cultivators, they usually stayed in the mountains and valleys. How would they know so many things about the imperial court? All right, don't mock senior brother. It's pardonable that senior brother isn't clear about this matter. After all, this crown princess really is very low-key in her actions. That's right. Everyone pursed their lips meaningfully in Zhao Yi's direction and joked. Otherwise, this senior brother Zhao of the City of Shadows wouldn't be so contemptuous of the bottle of spirit-returning medicinal liquid that the crown princess concocted. That's right. The other person nodded in amusement. In the beginning, didn't he look at Qi Nan with a malicious expression and warn him to be careful of the medicinal liquid that the crown prince consort gave him and that it would destroy his cultivation foundation? It's really a slap in the face every minute. At this point, the group of people couldn't help but laugh. The little stoic sat cross-legged in meditation and had already entered a meditative state. Naturally, it was impossible for him to hear the weird laughter and discussions of the people around him. Anyway, even if she heard it, she would probably turn a deaf ear to it. After all, these people only flattered Qi Nan because they saw the amazing effect of the medicine on her body. They repeatedly spoke good words for her and did not hesitate to belittle the unlucky senior brother Zhao Yi 17 to 18 times. In terms of character, these people were not much better than Zhao Yi. The group of people below were in a heated discussion. The outcome of the battle between Zhao Yi and Qi Nan had already been decided. Qi Nan kicked Zhao Yi onto the stage and pointed the long sword in her hand at Zhao Yi's neck. The latter's expression changed slightly, and his entire body trembled slightly. Only then did he close his eyes with a dejected expression. Damn it, he actually really lost to this Zhangzhou's talisman clan's Qi Nan. Chapter 40-167. You're just taking advantage of the crown princess of the divine land. Zhao Yi still managed to sneer. Naturally, he was unconvinced. Who would be convinced? He was supposed to be the winner. Qi Nan was so tired that he was about to collapse. In the end, the little crown princess threw a bottle of liquid medicine over. That damned Qi Nan seemed to have been injected with chicken blood. The more she fought in this battle, the more spirited she became. What kind of logic was this? Qi Nan was also very excited. He held his sword and stood still. He pretended to be very tired and was about to sit down cross-legged. Gu Yixuan stood up from his seat and flew to the arena. He said calmly, "Gu Yixuan from the City of Shadows. I'd like to learn from you." The audience was in an uproar. The brothers and sisters from the City of Shadows were really shameless. They were really trying to take advantage of the opportunity to kill Qi Nan. How did Qi Nan offend them? Why did they do this? Qi Nan's lips curled into a faint sneer. But he was very excited. His spiritual power was still rising. The last blow, which sent Zhao Yi flying, had cost him a lot of spiritual power. And at this moment, in just a short few seconds, it had recovered quite a bit. This was really the elixir of the gods. Qi Nan looked excitedly in the direction of the crown princess. He was thinking, why don't I ask the crown princess for a bottle later? Even if I have to spend more spirit coins, it doesn't matter. This elixir of the gods, even if I don't use it in the competition, it's still quite valuable. I must have a good relationship with the crown princess. Qi Nan took a deep breath. In the blink of an eye, he saw Gu Yixuan rushing up. The corner of Qi Nan's mouth flashed with a faint mocking smile. Compared to Zhao Yi, Gu Yixuan's cultivation was much weaker. Now he dared to run up to the arena. Was he here to humiliate himself? He was so much weaker than Zhao Yi, but he dared to show off in front of him. Qi Nan's mouth curved into a sarcastic smile. In the blink of an eye, Gu Yishuan's fiery fist was about to land heavily on him. Qi Nan raised her hand and slashed out with her sword. The fierce wind carried the terrifying qi of a mountain torrent. Suddenly, he slammed into Gu Yishuan's chest. Roars of excitement could be heard from the audience. Qi Nan had actually fought more than 10 battles in a row. Now, she had sent Gu Yishuan flying out of the arena with just one strike. Gu Yishuan, who was flying in the air, was struck in the chest and fell out of the arena. He was still thinking about this question. What's going on? Just now, when he saw Qi Nan's weariness, he just wanted to go on stage and take advantage of her, but he didn't expect Qi Nan was pretending to be tired. But the problem was he had indeed gone through more than a dozen battles, so why was he still alive and kicking? Gu Yishuan originally wanted to show his face in front of junior sister Xiao Shui, but in the end, his face was thrown all the way to the sea of forgetfulness. Thinking of this, Gu Yishuan felt uncomfortable. When he landed heavily on the ground, he seemed to have sprained his ankle. When he raised his head, he saw Zhao Yi's mocking face. Son of a bitch. He still wanted to pretend to be a hero in front of him. This Gu Yishuan really wasn't a good person. He wanted to let junior sister know that he, Zhao Yi, couldn't beat someone, but he, Gu Yishuan, could easily finish them off. Ha ha ha. In the end, this son of a bitch was finished off in one move. He really went for wool and came home shorn. Gu Yishuan was furious. Chapter 40, 168. But since he was so humiliated, he didn't have the face to continue being a disgrace in the front row of the audience. After all, the expressions on everyone's faces were a bit strange. Looking at him was like looking at a clown. It was a clown. Gu Yishuan closed his eyes and got up from the ground. He didn't return to the Shadow Academy's seating area, but dragged his sprained leg and walked out of the arena. Mu Xiaoxue showed an unbearable expression and stood up uneasily. She called out softly, "Senior Gu." Gu Yishuan looked back at her with a bitter smile and walked out dejectedly with his head lowered. "Senior Gu. Little junior sister, let him be alone for a while." Lin Jin'er patted Mu Xiaoxue's shoulder and consoled her softly. Gu Yishuan wanted to show off, but he didn't. He made a fool of himself in front of everyone and in front of his most admired junior sister. He probably wouldn't be able to recover in a short time. Zhao Yi returned to his seat and sneered, overestimating himself. "Senior brother Zhao." Mu Xiaoxue called out softly and glared at Zhao Yi with a coquettish look. "Senior Gu has suffered a big blow. As fellow disciples, let's not say things that will make him feel bad. At this time, we should be united." Many disciples from Fire Smelting City and Ice Sealed City were sitting beside the Shadow City. Now that they heard Miss Mu's unrestrained voice, they couldn't help but turn to look at her. Mu Xiaoxue blushed and nodded with a smile at Situ Yi and the rest, who turned to look at her. Situ Yi was baffled and turned back to say a few words to Wei Nanfeng beside him. The gentle expression on Mu Xiaoxue's face stiffened slightly. Liang Qingqing couldn't help but laugh. She shook her head and turned back, laughing softly. "What a kind and benevolent little white flower." "Little white flower? Where? Where?" And Lu shook his head and looked left and right. Fortunately, Mu Xiaoxue's hearing wasn't good. She naturally couldn't hear Liang Qingqing's muttering. Otherwise, she would probably be crying her eyes out. Royal Academy's Qin Xin versus Devil Star Academy's Luo Xian. Royal Academy Mo Lian versus Joey Academy. Royal Academy's Qin Xian versus Joey Academy. After a few impassioned reports, Nuno Duo became excited again. Holding the loudspeaker in his hand, he said to the crowd in a strange voice, "Everyone look. In this round, the Royal Academy will be facing the students from the Joey Academy. Joey Academy, do your best. You live in Joey City, and Joey City is your home ground. However, you have lost one after another, which has disappointed all of us citizens. This time, I hope the students of Joey Academy can create 2 miracles." The two hosts were like cannonballs, talking nonstop. Mo Lian, Qin Xian, and Qin Xian, who were flying towards the stage, all looked expressionlessly at the two noisy fellows. 3 pairs of beautiful eyes that were either cold or mocking instantly silenced those 2 fellows and made them leave the stage obediently. Without any suspense, he rolled away. Otherwise, they could still talk for a while. Really? Let the competition begin. The 2 hosts shouted in a loud voice. That Fiend Star Academy's Luo Xian chuckled as she looked at second young Master Qin, who was dressed in a moon-white academy uniform and had sharp brows and starry eyes. Chapter 40:169. All of a sudden, he felt himself being sent flying outwards. Mo Lian and Qin Xian, who had attacked at the same time, also used one move, a flick of their sleeves to send their opponents flying. Cough, 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 cough. Elder Ku almost choked on his own saliva. The entire crowd was stunned and fell into silence. Principal Yun slapped his thigh and stood up with a loud clap. Good, 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 good. This fellow had said good 5 times in a row. Everyone looked at him with disdain. How could this not be good? Could the royal school still have any shame? Previously, they had let the little crown princess, this pervert, fight in the arena. This was already very scary, alright? Now how many high-level cultivators had the royal school sent? Ha 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 ha. Principal. Elder Ku's old face twitched, and he raised his hand to tug at the corner of his shirt. He couldn't help but call out again, Principal. How could he not be excited? Look at this villain's smug face, too freaking weird. As the principal of a school, how could you laugh so wildly in public? Where would Li Xiangbei from the Joe Academy put his face? There was indeed no way to put it down. There was nowhere to put it. It was too embarrassing. Once they met, he didn't even have time to say, please take care of me, before he was flung out of the arena. He even fell with a bloody nose and a swollen face, with crooked eyes and a slanted mouth. The despicable royal school, they definitely did this on purpose. Purposely embarrassing Li Xiangbei, purposely making him go crazy. No, he had to calm down. He couldn't fall into that scum Yun Piaomiao's trap. The more he laughed wildly, the more he had to calm down. Calm down, calm down. Li Xiangbei took a few deep breaths before he managed to suppress his anger. At this moment, Mo Lian, Qin Da, and Omega Kotoku had already floated down from the arena and walked over casually. This was intolerable. Li Xiangbei couldn't help but say coldly, everyone from the royal school is indeed unusually cunning. You actually used such a method to defeat our Joe Academy. What do you mean? Yun Piaomiao couldn't help but glance at this guy. She snorted and said, what nonsense do you want to say now? Don't hide it, just say it all. I don't have the time to listen to you blabbering all day long and slandering the reputation of the Royal Academy. Are they not? Li Xiangbei said angrily. Are these people really students from the royal school? Ignorant and inexperienced. Yun Piaomiao said proudly. Our royal school accepts talents from all 3 continents. How is he not a student of the royal school? Let me tell you, within the royal school, there are at least 18 experts like them. Mo Lian sat down expressionlessly, no longer bothering with Yun Piaomiao. Qin Da and Omega Kotoku had similar expressions. They sat down and didn't want to say a word to the arrogant dean. Li Xiangbei was so angry that his entire body trembled. He pointed at Yun Piaomiao and said, You cheated. I'll go. Yun Piaomiao slapped away the finger that he was pointing at her. Can you be more mature, Dean Li? You're giving me the feeling that you're angry out of humiliation. Dean. On the other side, Instructor Broadaxe and the beautiful instructor hurriedly persuaded him to go back. Preposterous. Preposterous. Li Xiangbei sat in his seat and kept muttering. He had never seen such a shameless person like Yun Piaomiao in his life. You can go to sleep first. The rest of the night is before 12 o'clock. Chapter 40:170. Li Xiangbei propped himself up with both hands, barely suppressing the fury in his heart. Go and call Bui over. Have him challenge that fellow from the Qi clan. Instructor Broadaxe and the beautiful instructor couldn't help but be taken aback. They both turned to glance at Dean Li, Shouldn't they challenge the Imperial Academy's little stoic crown prince consort in order to regain their face from the Imperial Academy? What was going on? Why did he have to challenge Qi Nan? Was she easy to bully? Li Xiangbei remained silent with a cold expression. 2 hours had already passed since Qi Nan drank that bottle of medicinal liquid. Evidently, the effects of that spirit-restoring medicinal liquid were about to wear off. Li Xiangbei was very clear that once Qi Nan's medicinal effects wore off, Qi Nan definitely wasn't Bu Ye's match. Even though this Bu Yi was extremely difficult to control and had many demands. But now, he was at his wit's end. If he didn't let him go on stage, was he supposed to watch helplessly as Joey Academy set a remarkable record of 0 wins? Look at how unlucky Joey Academy was from the start of the competition until now. When they encountered the Royal Academy, they lost. Either they lost or they lost. It practically cast a shadow in Li Xiangbei's heart. This damned Yun Piaomiao. Just how many peerless geniuses from the 3 continents did he accept into the academy? Did he even have any chance of winning this competition? Although Bu Ye's cultivation wasn't as high as Zhang Qunlong's as a second-level god tier master, his methods were more than a level higher than Zhang Qunlong's. As long as he didn't encounter those 3 from the Royal Academy and didn't take the initiative to challenge the little crown princess, he should be able to continue fighting. Li Xiangbei lowered his voice and said, "Hurry and go. Take advantage of the fact that the crown princess of the Divine Province is in closed-door meditation to have Bu Yi challenge Qi Nan." Everyone was probably very clear on how unlucky Qi Nan was when this young man named Bu Yi jumped onto the stage. Qi Nan felt that oppressive aura rush toward her and knew things weren't looking good. This person's aura was too tyrannical. She wasn't this person's match at all. Even if she was at her peak, she still wouldn't be able to defeat this person in front of her. Let alone in this kind of situation? Qi Nan turned her head to glance at the little stoic crown princess on stage number 6 and saw that her slightly furrowed brows didn't even look in her direction. He could not help but let out a long sigh. If the little crown princess was willing to sell him another bottle of spirit-restoring elixir, he wouldn't fight with the man in front of him. But now, Qi Nan spat out the word I. He felt an intense divine power from his opponent striking his chest. The attack was as fast as lightning, leaving Qi Nan no time to think about how to dodge. Just as his brain was spinning rapidly and he was about to move away, the divine power had already landed on his body. His brain was still slow to react to this attack. In other words, the other party had attacked him as soon as they had met.
Poof.
Qi Nan's body fell backwards and fell heavily. He spat out a mouthful of blood. The young man in front of him looked like he was in his early 20s. He had a round face and a smile on his face. He wasn't very handsome, but his features were very delicate. However, this seemingly cheerful young man was extremely ruthless in his attacks. He heavily injured Qi Nan in one move and eliminated him. When he saw Qi Nan fall to the ground, he even wanted to take a few steps forward and crush the bones in his hand. Fortunately, Qi Nan promptly admitted defeat. Chapter 40, 171. The 2 hosts were also kind-hearted. When they saw that the situation wasn't right, they braced themselves and flew up, shouting, "Qi Nan concedes defeat. Qi Nan concedes defeat. Concedes defeat. Concedes defeat." This shout sent the crowd into a frenzy. Niu fearlessly rushed up and blocked Bu Yi with his hand. He straightened his back and stood next to Qi Nan, saying sternly, "You can't move anymore. You can't move anymore. Qi Nan concedes defeat." "Very good. You are the next arena master of our arena number 3. Student Bu Yi from Joey Academy has successfully challenged arena number 3 and will inherit the previous arena master's points, 1,200. Congratulations, Student Bu Yi. Congratulations, congratulations." Duo also wiped her sweat and looked at Bu Yi with a slightly horrified expression. She didn't expect this student Bu Yi from Joey Academy to be so savage and terrifying despite his fair, delicate, and adorable appearance. Previously, the other person had already admitted defeat, yet he was still unwilling to give up and wanted to step up and break the other person's limbs. Buyi giggled and was about to speak when he suddenly sensed something. He abruptly turned his head. At some unknown time, Arbor had already opened his eyes. At this time, the little stoic was coldly looking at this man on arena number 3. Huge waves billowed in the depths of her eyes. She seemed to have seen this person before in her previous life, but her impression was a bit hazy and she couldn't grasp some important details. She completely couldn't remember where she had seen this person before or what he had done. This made her involuntarily crease her brows slightly. No matter what, this person's aura gave her a gloomy and unbridled feeling. He definitely wasn't a good person. Buyi was startled, but then he opened his mouth and laughed, revealing a row of porcelain-white teeth at the little stoic.
What?
You want to avenge Chi-Nan? Buyi smiled provocatively. Then come challenge this arena master. Arbor looked at him icily. This gaze made Buyi even more displeased, and he couldn't help but crease his brows. Who was this stoic face looking at? Through his face, his gaze was unfathomable, as if he was looking at an ancient monster or a corpse. Dean Li, who had originally been full of joy and thought that the Joe Academy had finally regained its dignity, was now in a daze. At this moment, his face couldn't help but stiffen. He gritted his teeth and said in a low voice, "What is Bai doing? You're courting death." Wasn't that just courting death? He actually invited the young crown princess to challenge him? If this wasn't courting death, then what was? Now, everyone knew that the little crown princess seemed to have endless tricks up her sleeves. Even if she were to consume the elixir of returning elixir and drag it out with others, perhaps not many people would be able to defeat the crown princess before exhausting their own strength. Not wild. Dean Li's expression became even more gloomy and ugly. What he wanted was for Bai to at least enter the top 10. Instead of letting him court death the moment he entered the arena. There were still more than 5 days before he could enter the arena. Actually, the timing wasn't too good. Everyone knew that the earlier one entered the arena, the more exhausted one would be after a few rounds of fighting. As a result, it was impossible for those who were scheming to enter the arena so early, unless they were extremely confident in their own strength. For example, someone like the little crown princess. The little crown princess didn't know that in everyone's eyes, she had the image of someone who possessed a miraculous elixir, had a card up her sleeve, and was exceptionally talented. Chapter 40, 172. In reality, everyone didn't know that her main objective in going up the arena was she was too lazy to fight over and over again. It was better if others came knocking on her door or ganged up on her. That way, she could defeat more people in one go and obtain more points. It was that simple. But now, the little stoic expressionlessly looked at the youth who continued to court death at her in arena number 3 and blinked her large eyes. Duodwa's eyes and ears were everywhere. When she saw the little lady's expression, she immediately blocked in front of her and raised her hand to shout. During the competition, all arena masters who successfully set up their arenas are not allowed to leave their arenas under any circumstances. Arena number 3 and arena number 6, the arena masters will continue to accept challenges from other people. Challengers can directly go up on stage and announce their names. Arbor glanced at Bai on arena number 3 and raised her pinky finger to point in the air. "You're dead meat." Everyone. Fuck. Why did this stoic face look so fierce and adorable? It looked like the stoic never looked at looks when she beat people up. After all, when little ladies saw Bai's delicate and adorable face, they would more or less develop a favorable impression of him. It was naturally much more convenient for good-looking people to roam the pugilistic world. Bai looked at her with a grin and said, Okay, then I'll wait for you to teach me a lesson." In the blink of an eye, a pitch-black color spread across Arbor's eyes. The demonic pitch-black color invaded her eyes, and her entire pupils seemed to be dyed pure black in that instant, as if she was in an icy abyss. Mo Lien was startled, but she immediately stood up and called Jojo. When Arbor heard the call, she turned to look in Prince Mo's direction. She blinked, and her expression gradually returned to normal. Only a pair of large, watery eyes stared unblinkingly at the crown prince, seemingly a bit aggrieved. Mo Lien was alarmed, but she also let out a slight sigh of relief. Just as he was about to fly to his wife's side, he heard Omega Kotoku say coldly, "You can call her back for a moment, but can you call her back for a lifetime?" Eldest young Sir Chin lightly waved his fan. "How strange. Does this little fellow know that person called Bai?" "As far as I know, this Bai has always been in the Divine Province and has never been to the lower star domain." Eldest young Sir Chin asked with a chuckle, "May I know when the little stoic met him?" Mo Lien naturally wouldn't satisfy eldest Chin's curiosity, so she merely turned her head and coldly glanced at him. "This one isn't wild. It's said that he used to be from the Lu family of Tsangzhou. However, a few years ago, he suddenly poisoned his own family and killed everyone in the night before hurriedly fleeing to Joe City. He's doing well in the black market." Eldest young Sir Chin waved his fan and generously shared all the information he knew with everyone. How could this kind of person have any interactions with the little stoic? The little stoic's expression just now was very strange. For a moment, the way he looked at his enemy seemed to be somewhat similar to the way he looked at his second brother. This little thing had a lot of secrets on it. He really couldn't see through it. "Students, as long as you're on stage 3, you'll be able to challenge me. You can get a free bottle of spirit-restoring elixir. If you succeed in the challenge, you'll get 10 bottles for free." Eldest young Sir Chin wanted to ask more questions, but he heard an icy and crisp voice cut him off. The crowd immediately went into a frenzy. When everyone heard this, they thought, "Fuck, if you succeed in the challenge, you'll get 10 bottles of spirit-restoring elixir worth 20 million spirit coins." Instantly, they all eagerly signed up for the challenge. That's why it was said never to offend a pill alchemist. You'll be out of luck. The 10th watch ended. Chapter 4173. Naturally, being bullied by the little stoic as a target, Bai was so angry that the veins on his forehead bulged. He wished for nothing more than to directly scold her. Fuck, why was this little stoic so hateful? His face, which had always been smiling like a tiger, almost couldn't hold it in. Pill alchemists were amazing. Fuck, pill alchemists were indeed amazing. Look, it was only a few sentences, but they could stir up the wind, clouds, sun, and moon. Many people scrambled to curry favor and jumped onto ring number 3 one after another, shouting, "Challenge! Challenge! Challenge! Challenge my ass! You have to line up for a challenge." Duo and Nuno were grinning from ear to ear as they repeatedly said, "As expected, everyone's fighting spirit is high. Don't worry, everyone has a share and can fight. Everyone line up and sign up one by one. Student Bai, you have to be careful." Duo turned around and looked sympathetically at the red-faced Bai. "Normally, you'll be challenged consecutively after 10 rounds of ranking matches. Please prepare as soon as possible." Nuno also nodded heavily. "Be careful, Student Bai." Bai's expression was extremely unsightly. Below, Li Xiangbei's expression was even more unsightly. When he looked up and saw Yun Piaomiao's smiling face that deserved a beating, he truly felt that it was extremely irksome. "How pitiful," Yun Piaomiao said with a smile. "I didn't expect that everyone would line up to beat you up as soon as you stepped onto the stage." "Headmaster Li, I sincerely sympathize with you on behalf of all the teachers and students of the academy." Li Xiangbei naturally couldn't keep his old face. It was stretched taut and abnormally frightening. "Ha ha ha ha. Headmaster." Elder Ke couldn't resist twitching his mouth. If he were Li Xiangbei, he also wouldn't be able to restrain himself and would probably slap this guy to death. Headmaster Li was still able to keep his composure. Yun Piaomiao flicked the non-existent dust under his clothes and turned his head to snort. Who told him to come looking for trouble all day long? Who else would the headmaster attack if not him? Elder Ke gave him a look that said, "If revenge breeds revenge, will there ever be an end to it?" At the same time, The people lining up for ring number 3 had already formed a long line at the passageway below the stage. Damn, judging from the situation, could it be that there are about 300 people? Qin couldn't help but exclaim. Eldest young Sir Qin waved his fan with a smile. Oh my, so pitiful. Nothing good ever comes out of offending that little fellow. Omega Kotoku pursed his lips. On the other hand, Mingyasi seemed to have thought of something as he silently lowered his brows. Why isn't everyone speaking? Eldest young Sir Qin asked with a wink. Let's continue our previous topic. No one paid any attention to him. Mo Lian's cold gaze landed on the third ring. She carefully sized up the smiling young man who was gritting his teeth and smiling even in the face of such a predicament. Joe City was indeed full of hidden dragons and crouching tigers. The little stoic sat there cross-legged, her pair of beautiful eyes staring fixedly in the direction of platform number 3. What's going on? Who was this person? Where did this strange sense of familiarity come from? Xiaomu took a deep breath and reflexively pressed down on her head. She knew that there were many things that had been sealed in a corner of her heart. She never wanted to explore them, much less look back at them. She raised her hand and lowered her eyes, gently pressing down on the godly ruins mirror. She felt a slight heat at this spot. Arbor took a deep breath and did her best to calm herself down before calmly lowering her eyes. Chapter 4174. There were many things that she didn't want to investigate, but that didn't mean that she didn't dare.
It was just that she didn't want to.
Soon, Bai's arena number 3 became lively. More than 300 people lined up neatly below his arena. This situation was truly an unprecedented and spectacular sight. No one really thought of lining up at the back to pick up the leftovers. Everyone scrambled to be first, mainly because they were afraid that they wouldn't be able to get a share of the medicinal elixir if they lined up at the back. Arbor didn't express any opinion about this. She merely waved her fair hand and fished out a chest of spirit-restoring medicinal elixir, telling everyone with facts, "Don't panic. Everyone will have a share, and there will never be any left." Eldest young Sir Qin's eyelids twitched fiercely. Holy shit, this little lady was too ruthless. Directly taking out a chest of spirit-restoring medicinal elixir, how could they endure this? The seventh young lord, Qin Chong, who was sitting at the side, smiled sarcastically and said, "How extravagant. If it were me, I would also want to go up and fight." Qin immediately jumped up. "I'll go." Seventh Qin's expression turned ugly at once, and he turned back to glare fiercely at Qin. He reprimanded, "Why are you joining in the fun?" Upon seeing this, Qin chuckled mischievously and said, "Of course I also want that bottle of spirit-restoring medicinal elixir." All right. Eldest young Sir Qin chuckled as he smoothed things over. "Since little Joe wants to go, then let him go up and try. Don't tell me you aren't curious about that bottle of spirit-restoring medicinal elixir?" Seventh Qin snorted and reflexively touched his left arm, gazing coldly at fifth young Sir Qin, who was sitting next to him. Ever since that incident with Feng Mulan, his left arm had been broken by the little lady's ferule, and after returning to the clan, he had been whipped 30 times. Thanks to her, his injuries hadn't completely recovered yet. This little lady was innocent and cute on the outside, but she was a pitch-black mass on the inside. She truly had a rare heartlessness and callousness. The battle on arena number 3 was in full swing, and everyone eagerly leaped over there. Because everyone quickly discovered that as long as they could persist for more than a minute on arena number 3, they would receive a bottle of spirit-restoring medicinal elixir. And everyone who took the special spirit-restoring medicinal elixir would discover that their essence, energy, and spirit would recover without restraint. Even though he had used all his strength after the battle with Bui ended and he left the arena, he still found that his spiritual power naturally recovered very quickly within 2 hours. They finally understood why Qi Nan from the Qi family was getting more and more aggressive. So it was because this spiritual returning elixir had a sustainability. After he told the others about the special effects of the potion, more and more people came to challenge him. Finally, after 6 hours of non-stop battle, No, the medicinal pills that could be used on him were all used up. Therefore, he could only grit his teeth and announce that he was giving up on defending the ring. Li Xiangdong's old face was so dark that it couldn't be looked at. Especially when he turned his head and saw Principal Yun's smiling face, he felt anger rising from his heart. Damn it! When Buyi jumped down from the stage, he glanced darkly at the little stoic. At this moment, the stoic face's eyes were wide open, and her gaze was icily fixed on him. Suddenly, he raised his hand and shouted, "Where are the Crown Princess's personal guards?" Everyone was speechless. The fan and eldest young Sir Qin's hand fell to the ground with a clatter. Seventh Qin's expression turned unsightly in a split second. Willful and reckless. Pass down my order. Execute this person. What was arrogance? This was it. Directly giving an order in public under everyone's watchful eyes. Chapter 4175. Was she this terrifying? Everyone was stupefied as they stared incredulously at the little girl in front of them. This sudden change in attitude was truly like flipping through a book. It was completely incomprehensible. Hearing her words, Buye's smiling face finally changed color. In a panic, he ran towards the back of the Saint Auspicious Arena without looking where he was going. At the same time, there were several whooshing sounds in the wind. Countless figures shot up from the seating area and chased after Buyi in a hurry. Duo opened her mouth and turned around to meet the male host's eyes. The little stoic's sudden change in mood caught people off guard. Her mood also eased quickly. However, she silently sat back down in a flash, as if she hadn't done anything just now. She silently sat on stage number 6 and lowered her eyes in silence. Just like this, after 6 days of fighting, the final day of the Heavenly Origin ranking competition finally arrived. Regardless of whether they were competitors or spectators, both on and off the stage, the majority of people had extremely comical panda eyes and were mentally exhausted. The deafening cheers on the surrounding stages also became much softer. Wasn't this nonsense? Fuck. Why don't you try making a person continuously shout in excitement for 7 days and 7 nights? Can you still live properly? I am Sir Jojo's section break. Go in. After being shoved by someone, Mu Rochuan stumbled into the room and immediately felt like she had nowhere to step. Red and gold curtains were hung in the room, and it was extremely clean. Smoke curled in spirals, and the furnishings were clean. Against the window was a small table made of gold and silk, and a white jade saucer was placed on top of it. The fragrance of tea permeated the air, unable to conceal the flourishing atmosphere in the room. For a moment, Mu Rochuan had a strange feeling that she seemed to be in a dream.
Who are you people?
As the Mu family's eldest miss, Mu Rochuan naturally had seen the world. She wouldn't be dazzled by this fragrant room, and her mind was clear and calm. However, she was dressed in rags, covered in filth, and her hair was unkempt. Standing in this boudoir and stepping on the thick, furry carpet, she felt like she was standing on the tip of a needle, extremely out of tune with this place. Who was it that brought her here? Mu Rochuan looked up and saw a beautiful yellow-clothed woman walk in. She bowed to her and said with a smile, "Miss Mu, please wait a moment. My master will be here soon." Mu Rochuan stood there, feeling a little uneasy. But when she thought about it again, she realized that she was just a cripple now. Even her beauty was gone. When a person loses everything and has nothing else to lose, why should they be afraid of anything else? So she just stood there in the fragrant room, her eyes downcast, not saying a word. "Your temperament is much steadier than before." A faint voice came from behind the gorgeous bead curtain. Hearing this familiar voice, Mu Rochuan instantly raised her head and stared at her with wide eyes in shock. "Mother!" Mu Rochuan was slightly agitated. His hands, which were hanging by his sides, involuntarily moved a little. Mu Qingya's gaze fell on her, and she sized up her daughter. Her gaze was especially indifferent, as if she was looking at an outsider and not her own daughter. Mu Qingya was dressed in a flowery brocade gown, with her hair in a graceful and luxurious Feitian bun. She was exuding a luxurious fragrance, just like a madam of a noble family. Chapter 4176. In comparison, Mu Rochuan, who stood in front of her, was even worse than a child beggar on the side of the road. Looking at the graceful and calm Mu Qingya, Mu Rochuan suddenly felt ashamed of her own inferiority. Her mother, holy and noble, was like the clouds in the sky. She seemed very close to her, but in fact, she was thousands of miles away. She was so far away that she couldn't touch her at all. Rochuan. Mu Qingya looked at her dirty appearance, and her gaze suddenly fell on her left cheek. What happened to your face? Mu Rochuan raised her hand to touch her face. Scabs had already formed there, leaving behind an ugly centipede-like scar. I destroyed it myself, Mu Rochuan said indifferently. Why? Mu Qingya raised her eyebrows and looked her up and down, as if she was suddenly interested in this daughter of hers. Mother, don't you understand? A beautiful woman who had her cultivation destroyed and both her hands broken. What would happen if she was driven to the branch family? Others won't think highly of me just because I'm the eldest daughter of the main family. On the contrary, they'll do everything they can to humiliate me because of my previous noble status. Only by destroying this face can I continue to live my life with integrity. If she hadn't made the prompt decision to destroy her own face back then, perhaps she would have become a plaything in the hands of the young masters of the branch family. Mother, I didn't expect you to be such a chaste woman, Mu Qingya said indifferently, but her eyes revealed that she couldn't agree with her. Actually, as far as one's life is concerned, those worldly possessions are nothing. Reputation is just an external possession. Rochuan, you've disappointed me too much. To a woman, the body can be an extremely lethal weapon. You can use your beauty and body to do a lot of things, Mu Qingya said calmly. If you were willing to give yourself to a powerful young master when you went to the branch family, you wouldn't be in such a sorry state now. You're useless with a disfigured face and a broken hand. Mu Qingya frowned and criticized mercilessly. Although your father broke your hand and threw you out, your hands were still damaged. However, if the injury on my hand had been carefully nursed back to health and treated with medicine, it wouldn't have ended up like this. Your hand is completely crippled. What can you do in the future? Mu Rochuan's eyes widened in disbelief as she stared blankly at her mother. At this moment, she felt as if her heart had been shattered into pieces and was being mercilessly stepped on by someone else. She felt as if her heart had been crushed into mud. This was her mother, the mother who gave birth to her and raised her. He kept telling her how a woman should use her body to get what she wanted. Was this the mother that she had always respected? Her generous and magnanimous mother who treated everyone with gentleness and gentleness? Mu Rochuan felt that the woman in front of her was too unfamiliar and terrifying. So, you actually used your body to exchange for your current position and glory in Tianyan? Mu Rochuan instinctively felt sarcastic and couldn't help but laugh out loud. Mu Qingya looked at her daughter coldly. The yellow-clothed woman's expression immediately changed and she shouted angrily, "How dare you? How dare you be so rude to the hallmaster?" Mu Qingya raised her hand and stopped her from scolding. Chapter 4177. So, you're already aware of my situation? It's all thanks to Mother's blessing. Mu Rochuan said indifferently, even when I was far away in the branch family, I heard that the hall master of the Heavenly Fortune Flying Heavens Hall had been painstakingly lurking in the Mu family for many years. Mu Qingya glanced at the yellow-clothed woman and said softly, Yes. The yellow-clothed woman immediately walked forward, took out a bottle of medicinal liquid, and handed it to Mu Rochuan. What is this? Mu Rochuan took a step back warily and stared at Mu Qingya. Your meridians are crippled, and you've lost all your cultivation. Mu Qingya's expression was especially cold. Take this medicinal liquid, and you can instantly recover from your injuries. If you're lucky, you might even obtain a special ability. Heavenly Fortune can make the impossible possible, Mu Qingya said indifferently. It's just that your arms have been broken for almost 3 months. It might be a bit troublesome to treat them in the future. But don't worry, there's always a way. Mu Rochuan chuckled and tightly pursed her lips, tears involuntarily falling. Is that so? I'm flattered that Mother cares for me so much. I just don't know where Mother was and what you were doing in the past 3 months. What were you doing when your daughter was suffering in the Branch family and could only disfigure her face to protect her chastity? Mu Qingya brushed her clothes indifferently and sighed. Rochuan, the one who wants to punish you is your father, Mu Jingfeng. Your father insisted on punishing you for the sake of the crown princess, and Mother couldn't stop him. All right, now that everything is over, you can stay here with peace of mind. Mu Qingya stood up and said, Drink the medicinal liquid as soon as possible. It'll be good for you. Since I'm your mother, of course I'm thinking of you in every way. I won't force you, so think carefully whether you want to drink it or not. If you don't drink it, you can still stay here. Who told me to be your mother? Mu Qingya seemed to emit a gentle motherly light as she looked deeply at her. Mu Rochuan felt cold all over and shivered slightly. Since Mother wants me to drink, then I'll drink. Mu Rochuan sneered. In any case, there was nothing left for her to lose in this ruined body of hers. Even if he had to pay back his mother's life, it didn't matter. She took the medicinal liquid from and drank it in one gulp. Then, she frowned slightly. The feeling of consuming this medicinal liquid made her heart skip a beat. It felt like déjà vu, Mu Qingya, on the other hand, had been paying attention to her expression. At this moment, she saw a faint black light floating between her eyebrows. He couldn't help but exclaim, There's already a black crystal prototype? Have you ever taken this medicinal liquid before? Mu Rochuan's face also turned pale, and her body was on the verge of collapsing. She recalled that when she was in the Sun-Moon Mystery Realm, she had been severely injured and had been struck by lightning. At that time, the sun and moon alternated, and the secret realm was reversed. Someone gave her a scarlet pill to make her submit. She ate it. Now that he thought about it, it turned out that Tian Yun's lackeys were among the group that had gone to the Sun-Moon Mystery Realm back then. Mu Rochuan's expression was very ugly. She originally wanted to nurture this daughter well, but the black crystal was very magical. When she swallowed the medicinal liquid, whoever she swore to would be her master. Chapter 40, 178. She didn't expect that someone had already taken a fancy to Mu Rochuan's talent. That's right, Mu Qingya thought that even if Mu Rochuan's cultivation was lost, it didn't matter. As long as she was transformed by Tianyun's basic mutated medicinal liquid, her body would recover one day. It would be even better if she could comprehend a special ability at that time. Moreover, with Mu Rochuan, her daughter who was proficient in talismans and spells, she could train more talisman and spell masters for her. Without mystic energy, she naturally couldn't draw high-level talismans, but at least she had a brain. But now it seemed that Mu Rochuan didn't have a brain at all. She had already recognized someone in the organization as her master. It was impossible for her to absorb her into the flying paradise. Damn it! Mu Qingya took a deep breath and looked at Mu Rochuan for a long time with an ambiguous gaze before saying faintly, Take her away. This daughter was arrogant, conceited, and stupid. How could she have crawled out of her stomach? She had been teaching this daughter carefully all these years, but she didn't expect that she would achieve nothing in the end. Hall Master. A man in black entered the room and cupped his hands to Mu Qingya. Hong Chong, what's the matter? Mu Qingya waved her hand and let take Mu Rochuan away. Now she really didn't have the strength to talk nonsense with this idiot. Hall Master, the people in the Hidden Moon Hall that you asked me to keep an eye on just used a large number of teleportation talisman arrays. Do you know where they went? Mu Qingya suppressed the haze in her eyes and said solemnly, It should be Joe City. Lord Jojo was counting mushrooms. Yun Piaomia stood up and narrowed her eyes at the blue, cloudless sky in the distance. Elder Ke beside her also stood up with a dignified expression. It seems that many people are coming here. The competition was coming to an end. It was less than 2 hours before the end of the competition. So at this moment, Everyone seemed to have been injected with chicken blood and were full of vigor. Yelling and shouting were incessant. A group of onlookers jumped up from their seats, and there was a bit of chaos below the stage. Everyone had been sitting for so long. Some began to walk around the field, while others wanted to fish in troubled waters and squeeze to the front. Just as everyone was laughing and joking while watching the competition, a strange and sharp whistling sound came from afar from the horizon. Ordinary people didn't know what was going on, but the cultivators all looked solemn. Some cautious people had already begun to be on full alert. Ho ho ho! The giant wings flapped its giant wings, creating a dull wind sound. The people sitting in the front row, the birds named Joey, what's that? Is that a bird? Or a monster? They saw a giant 9-headed bird dragging hundreds of carriages, flying towards them at a rapid speed, blotting out the sun. People A's group.
Look.
Right. S Niño Duo, who didn't know what was going on, appeared beside them out of thin air and said with a smile, "Student Mo Lien from the Royal Academy, do you want to challenge Student Arbor?" Mo Lien glanced at them in annoyance, grabbed Arbor's hand, pulled him behind her, and said in a deep voice, "Enemy attack, disperse." Chapter 40, 179. As they spoke, the strange 9-headed bird had already descended above their heads. It flapped its huge wings, and its pair of sinister little eyes flashed with an incomparably vicious light. Arbor was shielded behind Mo Lien, and only her pair of cold eyes stared at the strange 9-headed bird above them. This fellow was extremely large. When it flapped its wings, it created a gust of wind that was like a whirlpool, blowing the people below off their feet. The onlookers all cried out in panic and scrambled toward the entrance of the passageway. For a moment, the field was in chaos. Many people were trampled, and cries of alarm could be heard from time to time. The strange 9-headed bird above them suddenly screeched. That sharp sound instantly caused many people's heads to buzz, and they spat out blood. From the hundreds of carriages that it was dragging, many corpse puppets with stiff bodies and strange faces suddenly drilled out. One by one, they stood there in the air, causing people's hair to stand on end. The strange 9-headed bird once again let out a long screech. As if they had received an order, those corpse puppets suddenly opened their eyes and moved their feet. It was as if they were following an invisible long staircase, descending from the sky. There was not a trace of white in the depths of their jet-black eyes. High-level corpse puppets. Arbor lowered her hand slightly, and a pitch-black crow repeating crossbow poked out from under her sleeve.
Ah.
Strange roars filled the entire battlefield. Densely packed corpse puppets flew down from the sky, each holding an iron rod in their hands. They swung it at anyone they saw, and their eyes were filled with viciousness. The ordinary people were immediately scared out of their wits, and they all scattered and fled. Arbor's eyes focused, and she sternly said, "Everyone stop. Don't run around carelessly." Dozens of jade talismans flew out from her fingertips, circling around the dozens of onlookers nearby and covering them. The jade talismans flickered, and a defensive wall instantly appeared in front of them. A young scholar who was closest to the wall could only watch as a pale-faced corpse puppet with scarlet eyes jumped onto the defensive wall and swiped its claw across the transparent wall. For a moment, the young scholar's heart almost jumped out of his chest. Then, he saw that the ferocious corpse puppet was struck by a blue light and shattered in front of him. "Everyone, wear a protective suit.
Don't get scratched by this thing,"
Mo Lien calmly instructed. Behind him stood several hundred black-clothed youths. Hearing this, they had already taken out protective clothing from their inner worlds at the fastest speed and put it on neatly. They said in unison, "Yes." Arbor flipped the talismans in his hand, and countless jade talismans flew out like a gust of wind. One by one, they built a square and indestructible defense under the viewing platform. The panicked commoners who did not know where to go were naturally anxious and rushed into the defensive wall one by one. The purple forest guards sprang into action, each of them wielding a specially modified repeating crossbow as they fired at the approaching corpse puppets. The sound of gravel rolling could be heard in the air. Suddenly, Huge rocks were thrown down by the harpies, crashing into the crowd. The commoners behind the defensive wall were better off. Their faces were pale, and they huddled together in fear. The moment the rocks fell, they were destroyed by a layer of blue light on the defensive wall. As for the people who were running toward the defensive wall, some were directly smashed into meat paste by the rocks falling from the sky. Some of them were smashed head-on under the rocks. Their legs trembled a few times outside the rocks, and then they stopped breathing. Chapter 40, 180. More corpse puppets leapt forward, grabbing people and biting them without regard for anything else. Anyone that was bitten by them would gradually turn into a corpse in just 15 minutes. Their entire body started to tremble numbly and stiffly as they quickly joined the corpse puppet army. This way, the corpse puppet army would definitely expand and become more and more spectacular. There were many living people here, and it was definitely an excellent place to turn corpses. Arbor's expression was grave as he looked in front of him. Situ Yi, Liang Qingqing, and the others had already joined the battle with a group of Fire-Smelting City and Ice-Sealed City disciples. They waved the sharp blades in their hands and quickly pierced the crystal cores in the heads of the corpse puppets. The nine-headed strange bird that was flapping its wings gave off another shrill shriek. All the corpse puppets seemed to be guided by something and instantly surrounded the crowd as though they had been injected with chicken blood. They surrounded the defensive wall and slammed heavily against it. The normal people hiding behind the defensive wall were almost scared out of their wits at this time. They kept praying inside, hoping that this transparent defensive wall could hold on a bit and not be torn apart by the corpse puppets. Otherwise, the people inside would all be finished. As the sounds of fighting rose everywhere, people continuously picked up the weapons on the ground and fought with their lives on the line against the corpse puppets. Arbor shot out a few black gold arrows and killed a few high-level corpse puppets that were approaching. His face was filled with silence. In such a chaotic scene, those with high cultivation couldn't do anything at all. If they activated the absolute kill formation and attacked indiscriminately, the innocent bystanders below would definitely be caught in the crossfire. Mo Lian naturally thought of this as well, so she couldn't tell him to activate the holy fire to burn this place. They could only move towards the densest part of the corpse crowd and do their best to keep the power of the five spirits within a certain range, so as not to implicate anyone else. At this time, the nine-headed strange bird gave off a strange shriek. Arbor raised his head and saw Duan Muqing and Mu Xingchen fly into the air with many Xiuzha and fight fiercely with the nine-headed strange bird. That strange bird had 9 heads and 18 pairs of small eyes. Its head could turn 360 degrees and had no blind spots. It could clearly see every Xiuzha fighting against it. With a shake of its body, it raised its head and howled. The ear-piercing sound instantly killed several practitioners with low cultivation. Mu Xingchen's expression darkened, and the flying sword in his hand flew out with a whoosh, aiming for the strange bird's neck. Only a dang sound was heard. Everyone's heart skipped a beat. This strange bird had a copper head and iron arms, and it didn't have a single weakness. Roar! Hundreds of harpies flew back and forth in the air, charging to the side of the strange nine-headed bird and guarding it like guards. Is this bird a night caw bird?
Yes.
Mo Lian held his wife's hand tightly and nodded with a solemn expression. However, it should have been greatly modified. This body is probably comparable to a holy beast. You stay here. I'll go meet him. Mu Xingchen and the others were no match for it. Mo Lian felt uneasy and held Arbor's hand. Arbor blinked slightly and raised his hand to hold his right hand. Be careful. Mo Lian nodded. A moon-white figure flew up and landed in front of the strange nine-headed bird. When he turned his head, he saw young Master Omega Kotoku had also flown up. At this time, he was silently standing beside him and coldly glancing at him. His eyes were extremely deep, as if they were filled with ice that would not melt for thousands of years. Chapter 40, 181. Mo Lian only glanced at him, frowned, and retracted her gaze. She carefully sized up the 9-headed bird in front of her. Among its 9 heads, only the one in the middle looked the most normal. Looking at the 8 heads, the closer they were to the side, the narrower they became. The 2 heads on the left and right were only slightly larger than an adult's fist. Their facial features were strangely squeezed together, like a sarcoma that had been cut several times. Black moon flashed in her hand, and a black flame climbed up. Without saying anything, it chopped towards the 9-headed bird's head. The strange bird let out an extremely unpleasant shriek, and its 2 sharp claws slapped. Although its body was excessively large, its speed wasn't weak. In an instant, it dodged the strange light shot by Black Moon, and at the same time, tore an ordinary cultivator with wide eyes and open mouth to pieces. Looking at the bloody scene in front of them, those hot-headed people who followed Mu Xingqian and Duan Muqing to fight the strange bird in the sky suddenly felt like a bucket of cold water had been poured over their heads. They were so frightened that they couldn't help but tremble. The strange bird flapped its wings, and suddenly let out another shriek. Emol Yen's eyes darkened. Block your 5 senses. This shriek was definitely poisonous. It was clearly a different kind of sound wave attack that could destroy a cultivator's divine sense. Second young master leaped forward, stabbing the strange bird's claws with his sword. Suddenly, he turned around and retreated, withdrawing his sword. The place where he originally stood was suddenly attacked by countless flames. Second young master. The Qin family members cried out, "Saintess!" Several calls from afar reached Arbor's ears. Arbor, who was rapidly arranging defensive array glyphs, turned her head and saw Feng Zhongqing rushing over with several hundred disciples. Feng Zhongfei's handsome face was sullen as he followed behind his big brother. He glanced at her, wanting to say something but hesitated. Arbor didn't talk nonsense with them and didn't bother to correct them for calling her saintess. She only said in a low voice, "Save people." "Yes." Feng Zhongqing nodded and was about to leave with his clansmen. Arbor suddenly took out several dozen sets of protective clothing from her inner world and threw them over along with a handful of talismans. "Be careful." Feng Zhongqing's eyes flashed with a smile. He raised his hand and pulled his younger brother, who snorted from his nose, and hurriedly ran toward the crowd. Although Feng Zhongfei was grumbling, "Elder is really meddlesome, forcing us to secretly protect him." What can happen to this stoic face? His hands, however, did not stop following his big brother's movements, clearing out all the nearby zombies as if he was chopping vegetables and melons. He protected some of the pale-faced commoners and retreated. When Mu Xingqian and the others saw that Mo Lian had come over and was able to deal with the strange 9-headed bird, they immediately heaved a sigh of relief. They hurriedly turned around and called out to Little Fatty and the others, running over to fight the harpies. These harpies hung above everyone's heads like shit. Although they did not have the power of the 5 spirits, they would still throw some stones from the surroundings of the venue. It was not harmful to the Xiuzha, but it would harm the ordinary spectators below. Gongzi Omega Kotoku coldly looked in Mo Lian's direction and suddenly raised his hand to block Qin Jiu and the others who were about to rush forward. "Let's take a look first." Qin Jiu was taken aback. "Second brother, we should hurry up and help Prince Mo if Duan Yu is here. He definitely wouldn't hesitate like he was now. He would have helped Prince Mo fight this strange 9-headed bird in the morning." Qin Jiu thought, but he didn't dare to refute the second young master due to his accumulated power. Mo Lian doesn't need anyone's help. Mo Lian moved forward in a flash. Black moon flew out of her hand and rapidly pierced into the middle head of the strange 9-headed bird like a shooting star. The strange bird let out a mournful shriek. One of its eyeballs fell out and landed with a thud. Chapter 40, 183. At the same time, a terrifying scream came from above the bird's back. It turned out that Holy Sun Mi Yan had seized the opportunity to stab the person who was lying dormant on the bird's back and attacking Mo Lian. That person suddenly rolled down from the bird's back and was beheaded by Holy Sun Mi Yan with 2 swords. When they looked back, They saw the 3 soul-chasing arrows chasing after the crown prince, as if they had been injected with chicken blood. Prince Mo was expressionless. Several black flames sprang out from his fingers and suddenly wrapped around the 3 soul-chasing arrows. Young Master Omega Kotoko looked at the crown prince coldly. The 3 soul-chasing arrows were wrapped by the crown prince's black flames and melted into a black liquid in a matter of minutes. Divine Weapon Master. Everyone was shocked. Those who understood could not help but open their mouths wide. These 3 soul-chasing arrows were definitely not ordinary items. Prince Mo could melt them in such a short time with only one hand of black flames. It was clear to see just how powerful the Tao of artifact forging was. Any weapon with spirit that dared to offend him was simply courting death. However, with a swipe of his hand, Mo Lien collected that melted liquid into a bottle. At the same time, the 9-headed strange bird roared and broke free from its restraints. But soon, under the joint efforts of Holy Sun Mi Yen and the Venerable Peach Blossom Immortal, the strange bird was entangled by a layer of water spirit wall and a wood spirit wall. Mo Lien flew straight up and raised Raven Moon in her hand. At the speed of light, she cut off half of one of the 9-headed strange bird's heads. The strange bird was in pain and let out a mournful and ghostly scream. Its sharp and strange voice instantly made the practitioners who were fighting with the corpse puppets dizzy. The strange bird immediately dragged its huge wings and turned around. It left everyone behind and hurriedly escaped from this place. The broken carriage frame immediately fell from the sky. From time to time, there were solid pieces of wood that fell into the crowd. Everyone dodged and looked up to see the strange bird escape. A large number of harpies also seemed to turn and flee in panic under the strange bird's shrill cry. A sense of relief rose in their hearts, and they heaved a long sigh of relief. Finally, these things were driven away. However, Mo Lien and Arbor's expressions were not relaxed at all. Their faces were heavy. The things that Tian Yun could bring out seemed to be getting stronger and stronger. In the future, what kind of good days would the people have? Although the remaining corpse puppets had all been taken care of, the corpse puppets were still alive. However, the people from Arbor were not relaxed at all. After all, it was hard to say whether the injured people would be infected on a large scale. A good Heavenly Yuan competition had ended in such a way. Everyone couldn't help but sigh. Mo Lien turned around to look, only to see that Second Qin, who had originally been standing there, had already left. Eldest young Master Qin was leading a few juniors of the Qin estate to help treat the crowd. "What are you looking at?" The little stoic tugged at his sleeve. Mo Lien shook his head. He was thinking about how much Omega Kotoku wanted him dead. But did he think that as long as he died, he would be able to mend his relationship with Jojo? What kind of sweet dreams were they having? Even if he was no longer around, wasn't there still Duanyu? When was it his turn to take care of Jojo? Ba. Why was he assimilated with Jojo? No matter who he met, he always liked to use Duanyu as a comparison. When the two of them exited the holy auspicious arena, they saw a scene of devastation. The streets were filled with rampaging corpse puppets and the figures of the city guard hunting and killing. The two of them looked at each other. Chapter 40-184. Their moods were naturally heavy. They didn't expect that Joe City would be the first place to be attacked by the corpse puppet army and cause serious damage. Previously, they had only attacked small villages on the outskirts of Lee City and Tsang State's Eagle City's Little Lee Town. The crowd definitely wouldn't be as dense as Joe City. So Tianyun's actions have begun to escalate? Quick, catch him. Don't let him escape. After an angry shout, several people wearing the city lord's guard uniform quickly rush in their direction. How could the stumbling woman who was running at the front with 2 half-grown children in her hands outrun those ferocious guards behind her? One of the guards raises the broadsword in his hand and slashes at the woman's head without a care. Mo Lien flicks her finger, and a gust of wind flies out, directly breaking the blade. Half of the blade bounces off with a clang and is stuck in the wall at an angle. The expressions of the guards suddenly change. They turned to look at the blade stuck in the wall, then turned back to look at the handsome man in the school uniform, who is as clean as the wind. They uniformly take 2 steps back. The stone bricks on the wall are very thick, they are very clear. If one's cultivation isn't high, how can one flick the blade into the wall? The woman hurriedly grabs the 2 children and scrambles behind Emolien and Arbor, begging for mercy. "Young master, young miss, please save us, save us." "What are you doing?" Arbor's cold eyes look at the burly men in front of him. Since when can ordinary people be killed wantonly in this city? There are always some animals who take advantage of the chaos to make a fortune. Are these people guards or robbers? The leader of the guards still politely salutes them with cupped hands. This woman has traces of being bitten by a corpse puppet. "We are following orders." "No, no." The woman screams in horror. She doesn't care if they are in public and directly pulls up her sleeves to show Arbor. "Young miss, young master, they are wrongly accusing me. I have never been bitten by a corpse puppet. These people broke into my house, killed people for money, murdered my brother and sister-in-law, and even attacked my 2 nephews. Therefore, the most chaotic thing was still the human heart." Arbor's eyes coldly swept over those people, and the corners of his mouth curled up in a cold arc. "Kill them." "Miss, what are you doing?" The leader of the guards finally panicked slightly when he saw several black-clothed youths with extraordinary skills surrounding him from all directions. "We're just doing our job. Anyone bitten by a zombie will quickly turn into a zombie." A vine whip whipped the man heavily against the wall. Arbor pursed his lips and looked at him coldly. When the man got up, he lashed out with his whip again. After 7 or 8 lashes, the guards were so scared that they were trembling all over. They knelt on the ground and kowtowed repeatedly. This woman and those 2 children didn't have the slightest bit of corpse chi on them. These guards actually dared to make a move on the lion's head and swindle her, Xiao Mu. It was simply laughable. Joey City is going to fall into chaos. Emolien raised her head slightly and looked at the dark sky. In the evening, the entire Joey City was shrouded in rain and fog. Everyone gathered in the city lord's residence and could clearly hear the chaotic roars of the corpses. The city lord fled with his family. Chapter 40:185. This son of a bitch. The bad-tempered instructor Broadaxe slammed his fist on the desk, his expression extremely unsightly. Just now, they received news that Joey Academy had also been attacked by zombies and suffered disastrous casualties. Many students were also injured, and they didn't know if they would mutate in the future. The city was currently in chaos, and everyone could only retreat to the city lord's estate to discuss a countermeasure. "Everyone, the current situation is not optimistic at all. We plan to withdraw from Joey City for the time being," said Instructor Hiwei of the City of Shadows. "If we leave now, what about the citizens of the city?" Someone immediately questioned. "If we don't leave, what can we do if we stay here?" Hiwei lowered his eyes and said very calmly, "Do you still not understand?" Tianyun came prepared this time. He clearly wants to occupy Joey City. Arbor glanced at this instructor from the City of Shadows and nodded in his mind. He was a sensible person. Tianyun's move was to occupy Joey City as a stronghold. They planned to bring everything to the table and deal with it. Mu Xiaoxue said softly, "I think we should help them as much as possible and take away all the citizens that we can. For example, the several hundred people hiding in the city lord's estate. We naturally have to help them if we can." Hearing this, Liang Qingqing glanced at her and sneered. "How do you know if anyone has been bitten inside? What if they mutate midway back? Do you have the corresponding protective measures?" She had always been straightforward and said whatever was on her mind. But this impetuous tone was grating to the ears of Zhao Yi and Gu Yishuan, who were eager to protect her. Zhao Yi slapped the table and said angrily, "How can you say that? Little junior sister is just being kind." Liang Qingqing was also a bit angry. No matter how she heard it, she felt that this man calling Mu Xiaoxue little junior sister was irritating. Her stoic little junior sister was still cute. Why did this little junior sister of the City of Shadows look so vexing? Situ Yi hastily stopped Liang Qingqing and said aloofly, It's not that we don't want to help others, but we have to take care of our own people before helping others. Although the little stoic didn't utter a word, her eyes expressed her agreement. Mu Xiao Shui hurriedly stopped Zhao Yi and nodded at Situ Yi. This young master is right. Xiao Shui also has the same thoughts. Since that's the case, let's discuss how to save them. The fire-smelting city's city lord lifted his sleeves and sat down. He glanced at the icebound city's city lord beside him. Which area does icebound city plan to go to? Everyone had long been accustomed to the discord between the two city lords, so they didn't find it strange. They all gathered together and looked at the city map on the table. Joey City was a very large city, and its population was very scattered. These academies, from teachers to students, added up to less than 7,000 people. They could only do their best. They would save as many as they could. Once they left the city, this place would quickly become a gathering place for corpse puppets. Tian Yun also had his own considerations when choosing the location. For example, Joey City was a lawless area that didn't belong to the 3 states and had nothing to do with the 4 major cities. It was already benevolent of them to lend a helping hand. What do the 2 crown princes think? Mu Xiaoxue asked softly. Everyone's gazes landed on Emol Yen and Ming Yasi. Akir glared fiercely at Mu Xiaoxue. Chapter 40-186. What do you want to say? You want our Ming province to take in those filthy and useless people? Akir haughtily lifted her chin and coldly swept a glance at Mu Xiaoxue. If you want to be a saint, you should take these people back to your city of shadows. In any case, your city of shadows is comparable to Ming province's capital, so it can definitely accommodate these people. Mu Xiaoxue's small face paled slightly, as though she didn't expect this Ming province girl to be so shrewd. Mocking her as a saint as soon as she opened her mouth, Liang Qingqing curled her lips in amusement and flashed to the little stoic side. Little junior sister, let's go out for a walk. The atmosphere was so foul that she could feel a gloomy atmosphere even if she stayed in the room. She didn't want her little junior sister to suffocate. The little stoic nodded. When the two walked out hand in hand, they happened to see a group of people walking into the city lord's estate's main hall. When the leader saw her, he immediately gave her a dirty look. He didn't even look at her and directly led the group of people to walk past her. Liang Qingqing immediately knitted her brows and turned to glance at that haughty girl. This girl looked to be 18 years old. She was pretty and beautiful, and her lips were gorgeous. However, her chin was slightly sharp and narrow, giving her entire face a bit of sharpness. Who is it? Liang Qingqing asked in a low voice. Someone on the other side had already announced clearly, Medicine King Island's Miss Anai Hanji has arrived. Liang Qingqing couldn't resist rolling her eyes as she watched the 2 rows of Medicine King Island's guards clear the way and escort the girl to the table. You know her? Liang Qingqing pulled the little stoic out the door. Arbor nodded.
I've seen her a few times.
Medicine King Island's island master's daughter? She's a high consecrator's disciple. Fuck, I thought she was the future island master. Wasn't she just a consecrator's disciple? What a grand show of extravagance. It really scared Qingqing to death. After the 2 of them left, they naturally didn't pay attention to Anai Hanji's movements. Anai Hanji walked in front of everyone and said aloofly, Medicine King Island learned that something happened in Joey City and sent us to help. Anai Hanji had originally followed the Lin family to join in the fun. Previously, she had been arrested along with Lin Myoer and Gu Isin to the capital's prison. Fortunately, the Lin family and the Medicine King Island had worked together to mediate, and she had finally been released from prison. In order to make amends, the Lin family naturally granted her every request. He thought that Anai Hanji was in a bad mood, so he accompanied her to Joey City to watch the competition and relax. Who would have thought that they would encounter such a thing? Originally, Anai Hanji didn't want to get involved in the muddy waters of Joey City. It was just that he had received a message from the island master not long ago, so he reluctantly accepted it. The Medicine King's Island is a place of benevolence and care for the poor commoners. Anai Hanji said with an indifferent expression. This time, Joey City has met with a great disaster, and the commoners are suffering. If they need any elixirs, medicinal liquids, and the like, Medicine King Island can give everyone a 30% discount and sell them cheaply. Everyone could not help but look at each other. Isn't this Miss and I of Medicine King Island a bit too strange? Those medicinal pills and medicinal liquids were easily worth thousands of gold. Ordinary commoners, even if you gave them a 50% discount, they wouldn't be able to afford them, right? Isn't he supposed to be benevolent and caring for the world? Why do they still need money? Everyone was a bit confused, and Hanji swept a disdainful glance at them. What's with your expressions? Are there any pharmacists among you with special abilities? Step forward, and Hanji said impatiently. Chapter 4187. According to our Medicine King Island's research over the past few days, and Hanji sat down at the table and said indifferently, high-level apothecaries can suppress corpse poison. Her gaze swept over everyone's faces. The higher the level of the apothecary, the richer the medicinal effects. If the apothecary gives himself medicinal effects in advance, he can prevent corpse poison for a certain period of time. Our Medicine King Island has 2 golden-level apothecaries, but unfortunately, they are not here at the moment. And Hanji's expression was haughty as her gaze swept over Mo Lien's group, who had turned to leave without a word. Her gaze instantly turned furious. Stop right there. The 2 rows of Medicine King Island guards immediately drew their sabers and blocked the path of Mo Lien's group. Mo Lien looked back and sneered, spitting out 2 words from between her teeth.
You want to? Die?
The Medicine King Island guards blocking her path were clearly intimidated by her aura. Their hands trembled, and they almost lost their grip on their sabers. They hastily retreated a few steps uneasily. And Hanji slammed the table and stood up, reprimanding angrily, "Look at you motley crew. What can you do for the citizens of the city? Our Medicine King Island has stepped forward without hesitation to lead this battle against Heavenly Providence, but you are not cooperating at all." And Hanji said angrily, "Don't think that just because of your noble status," Ming Yasi left with his group without another word and waved his hand in passing. "We will head to the eastern region from the Underworld Province. We from the Divine Prefecture will head to the western region." Eldest young Master Qin chuckled as he fanned himself and led the Qin Estates group outside. And Hanji suddenly felt that her face was getting more and more embarrassed. She almost couldn't breathe because of the anger in her chest. Akir couldn't help but snicker. "Look, you think you're infallible, using Medicine King Island's chicken feather as a token of authority. Do you really think you can ride over the 3 provinces? To put it bluntly, Medicine King Island was a desolate island reclusive from the world. It had nothing to do with the 3 provinces. And you want to use Medicine King Island's name to command them? Songzhou's Huayu Academy, Underworld Continent's Tianhua Academy, and the people from the 4 major cities all stood up and followed out. They couldn't be bothered with Hanji, who was talking to herself. Where did this lunatic come from? The moment he came in, he wanted to give orders to all of them. If you don't know how to speak properly, then scram. "Miss, what should we do now?" A little maidservant with a round face hesitantly took a step forward and asked in a mosquito-like voice. And Hanji clenched her teeth and slammed the table. "Corpse puppets are everywhere in the city. It's hard to move around. Without a doctor to help them, let's see what they can do." And Hanji couldn't help but grit her teeth when she thought of the Crown Prince's icy gaze when he turned back to look at her. She thought of the Crown Prince's mocking gaze when he looked at her. These people did not put her in their eyes. Soon, they would know how to write the word death. At that time, she would make them all beg her. Arbor tugged at Mo Lien's sleeve, and the latter naturally looked down at him, amused by the little fellow's curious baby face. "What is it? What did that woman say just now?" When she and senior sister Liang were chatting outside the door, they couldn't help but be curious when they saw Ming Yasi and the others storming out. "Just a woman who thinks she's infallible," Mo Lien said indifferently. Lu Yu and the others followed behind Prince Mo and couldn't help but laugh when they heard this. Miss Ni was giving orders just now, but unfortunately, no one was willing to pay attention to her. Chapter 40, 188. Arbor uttered an "oh" and didn't say anything else. Why was it that every time they chatted, they would kill the conversation? Everyone couldn't help but twitch their mouths. They couldn't resist sizing her up and shaking their heads as they snickered inwardly. The little stoic didn't seem to be interested in what was happening in the room at all. She was actually just casually asking the group headed to the western part of the city. While they were cleaning up the zombies, they also rescued some commoners who had been surrounded by zombies. Arbor and the people from the Chin estate helped to check if they had been poisoned by zombie poison. While they were busy, they heard a commotion ahead. Oh no, a zombie has scratched several people. It's charging toward us. Ah. Following the frantic shouts, the crowd that had already stabilized started to flee in a panic again. Don't run around recklessly. Qin Jiao yelled anxiously. Hey, you guys. However, who could clearly hear what the others were saying at this critical moment. Everyone was fleeing for their lives out of instinct. Duanmu Qing drew his sword to meet the zombie baring its fangs and brandishing its claws, chopping off one of its tentacles. This thing was neither human nor beast. Its arm was like an octopus with countless soft tentacles extending from it. It was truly frightening to look at. This is an advanced level rank 3 zombie. On the side, Lu Yu said gravely, "Be careful that its tentacles will separate." Before she could finish speaking, that zombie's 2 tentacles flew out with a whoosh and whipped directly at the long sword in Duanmu Qing's hand. Duanmu Qing was alarmed, and he spun around to retreat 2 steps. A spirit fire burned over and enveloped that tentacle. However, that thing was very tenacious and only burned to ashes after jumping a few times in the fire. The zombie was extremely vexed after suffering 2 losses in a row. Advanced level rank 3 zombies like this had developed intelligence and were very vengeful. Immediately, as if it had locked onto Duanmu Qing, it whipped out several tentacles and swiftly crawled toward him. Be careful, Xiao Mu shouted from afar, whipping out a vine with a flick of her hand. However, a hole suddenly split open on that tentacle zombie's chest, and a scarlet-eyed zombie chick burrowed out. Without any explanation, he bit onto Duanmu Qing's left wrist. Qi Xianxian cried out in surprise. Before she could rush forward, she saw Duanmu Qing lift up the corpse puppet bird with his sword and slash it into meat paste with a few slashes. Little Fatty quickly ran to his side and pulled his hand to take a look. His eyes turned red with anxiety. Broken wood. I'm fine. Mo Lian and Hechen rushed over when they heard the news. They immediately stopped the high-level zombie with 17 to 18 tentacles. One of them used a wooden cage to imprison it. The other person's black flames spread and burned. The high-level zombie puppet roared twice at first, but gradually, it was roasted into a puddle of corpse water by the black fire. Before it died, its small eyes emitted a very human-like look of fear. Looking at Mo Lian and Ma Shichen's expressions, it was as if they had seen a ghost. It was truly hilarious. He was the one who looked like a ghost, but he saw others as ghosts. The exhausted commoners collapsed to the ground one after another. Some covered their faces and cried, some hugged their heads and cried bitterly. All of them were at a loss of what to do. They only felt that their future was boundless, and they didn't know where they would end up. Duanmu Qing. Arbor dashed over and grabbed his wrist. He lowered his head and saw that the little zombie chick had bitten 2 black bloody holes in his hand. The skin around the holes was already rotting. It's fine. Duanmu Qing shook his head. Just now, he had already used the medicinal power to control this layer of corpse energy and confined it to his wrist. Chapter 40, 189. He took out his sword, but Arbor grabbed his hand and shouted angrily, "What are you doing?" Duanmu Qing was a bit stupefied by her berating, and he muttered, "Chop, just chop off his wrist." Ha! Arbor snorted. "You're a brave man who severed his wrist, not distressed at all." Qi Xianxian wiped her tears on the side. "Big brother Duanmu, how about we think of another way?" Xiao Mu was burning with rage, and she burned the small zombie puppet bird that Duan Muqing had already chopped into several pieces into ashes. This hateful zombie bird. She couldn't help but recall how she was bitten by the zombie that brought Yu Hui at Qianluo's underground fighting arena. The ones that bit her were precisely this kind of seemingly harmless small zombie bird. They always like to hide behind or inside large zombie puppets and deliver a fatal blow at any time. Duan Muqing glanced at her helplessly and said softly, "Jojo, if I use medicinal power to control this zombie poison, I have to replenish it every 2 days. Otherwise, it will spread to my arm again. Who knows if one day my medicinal power won't be able to keep up, and he might as well sever his wrist cleanly." Duan Muqing wasn't someone who liked to be a burden to others. In any case, it was his left wrist that was bitten, so it wouldn't affect him holding a sword normally. Even if it was his right wrist that was bitten today, at worst he could just start practicing using his left hand again. "Shut up." The little stoic berated him angrily and abruptly pressed a handful of ointment onto his wound, crushing it fiercely with her small hand. It hurt so much that Duan Muqing's handsome face twitched slightly, but he endured it and didn't make a sound. "Jojo, Jojo." Qi Xianxian was a bit alarmed and poked the back of her hand. The little stoic's expression was unsightly, and the icy glint in her eyes could freeze Duan Muqing into pieces. This person usually didn't speak much, but he didn't seem to care about his body at all when he made a decision. He's really decisive. Sever his wrist? He was probably still thinking that it was fortunate that it wasn't his right wrist that was severed. She really wanted to beat him to death. Mo Lian walked over and patted Duan Muqing's shoulder. She pulled his hand over and naturally infused the medicinal effects into his body. Duan Muqing's eyes suddenly flickered. He looked at the Crown Prince in surprise and said softly, "God tier? God-level pharmacist." He could sense that the medicinal power coming from the Crown Prince was at least a stage higher than his own. If he was a heaven-grade alchemist, then the Crown Prince was at least a divine-grade alchemist. He was indeed very strong. As Duan Muqing thought to himself, a sense of reverence for a high-level pharmacist rose in his heart. "All right, keep it under control for now. Jojo will think of something." Emolian glanced at him and tugged on the little girl's cold hand. He patted her head to comfort her. "Jojo, it's okay now." "Huh." A mocking laugh came from outside the crowd. She saw 2 rows of guards from Medicine King Island, escorting Nai Hanji over like stars surrounding the moon. Miss Ni's expression turned ugly when she saw the Crown Prince. The moment she spoke, she questioned loudly, "So you two are both pharmacists? Then why didn't you say anything when I asked at the city lord's estate whether there were pharmacists? You're too selfish." Nai Hanji looked icily at the 2 men in front of her. Both of them were good-looking people. Currently, Duan Muqing was injured, and his face and wrist were stained with blood. Lu Yu was supporting him, but it didn't affect his handsome appearance at all. Instead, it added a bit of sickly beauty to him. Chapter 40-190. Nai Hanji's eyes flickered as she thought, "These 2 before me, along with those young sirs from the Qin estate, are indeed worthy of the title of exceptionally fine young sirs. Unfortunately, their temperaments were too unruly and aloof, and not a single one of them gave her a good look. When she was on Medicine King Island, no man dared to treat her like this. When she traveled outside with her master, she was always flattered by every patrician family they visited. When had she ever encountered these stubborn people? Eldest young Sir Qin creased his brows and glanced speechlessly at the woman before him. Could it be that this woman's lunacy flared up again? Did she think that Mo Lian and Duan Muqing were her servants or subjects? How dare she berate them like this? The Omega Kotoku young master also abruptly creased his brows and turned his head away in disgust. Qin Jiu pursed his lips and said, "Are you crazy? What did it have to do with a woman from Medicine King Island like you whether or not they have medicinal effects and whether or not they want to use it? Did you have to show such an interrogative tone? Why aren't you saying anything?" Nai Hanji stood there majestically and questioned furiously. Earlier, she clearly said that if there was an apothecary, they would step forward themselves. In the end, no one paid her any attention. It was simply infuriating. Before Mo Liend could slap this person away, the little stoic teleported in front of Anai Hanji and swiftly darted her ferrule out from her sleeve. Eldest young Sir Chin couldn't resist covering his face with his hand. He had a premonition that the following scene would be very explosive. As expected, the little stoic's frosty face that wouldn't melt for 1,000 years slapped Anai Hanji's face with her ferrule without a second word. After a crisp slap, Anai Hanji was still a little taken aback. She probably never expected that someone would actually dare to lay a hand on her, someone from the dignified Medicine King Island. Hence, when the other ferrule slapped her right cheek, she finally snapped out of her daze with grief and indignation. Her small face contorted as she shouted harshly, "You dare lay a hand on me?" Xiao Mu flew up and kicked Anai Hanji in the stomach, directly sending her flying. She somersaulted 3 times in a row before slamming her into a low dirt wall with a bang. Everyone turned pale with fright as they dodged to the left and right. They covered their heads and squatted down, not even daring to breathe. Soon after, they discovered that the little stoic was only targeting that young lady from Medicine King Island. She didn't even glance at the others. The 2 rows of guards from the Medicine King Island glared angrily. Just as they were about to step forward with their sabers drawn, they were surrounded by a group of black-clothed youths, unable to move an inch forward. Ridiculous. What the hell? You talk too much. With a cold expression, the little stoic kicked Anai Hanji 3 times in a row, sending her tumbling heavily in front of eldest young Sir Chin. All the young sirs of the Chin estate simultaneously retreated 3 steps in unison and very perceptibly cleared out an empty space for the little stoic to display her skills. The little stoic had truly endured this person for too long. If it wasn't for her master, why would she tolerate her? Grandmaster, Huan had such a good temperament and self-restraint. How could he have taken in such a foolish disciple? Did his brain fall into a manure ditch? Did he not bring it out when he was born? The little stoic's pent-up fury finally dissipated after she was kicked several times in succession and given a round of violent beatings with the ferrule. She turned her head and angrily shouted at Duanmu Qing, "Acting on your own initiative." Young Sir Duanmu was a bit stupefied. Yuan Shurchen could not help but twitch the corner of his mouth. He raised his hand and patted Duanmu Qing sympathetically. With a mocking expression, he said, "Although Qiao Qiao was beating that person up, all 4 sentences were scolding you." I speak a lot of nonsense?" Duanmu Qing was instantly speechless. Chapter 40, 191. To Arbor, Duanmu Qing's words of severing her wrist and no problem were probably nonsense. Emolian was a bit speechless. She walked up and pulled her expressionless wife back. All right, there's no need for you to do it yourself. If you don't like her, just have Ao Yi and the others beat her up." Ao Yi nodded in agreement. They had long found this bossy peacock-like woman displeasing to the eye. What the hell was she? Shouting and wrangling in front of the crown prince. Did she really think she was someone important? Wasn't she just a minor disciple from Medicine King Island? What right did she have to be so rude to His Highness and think so highly of herself? Anai Hanji's face was filled with terror, and she swayed from side to side before barely managing to stand up straight. Her hair was disheveled, and locks of her hair drooped in front of her chest. Her face was covered in bloodstains, and her eyes were beaten to a pulp, so she couldn't see the things in front of her clearly. "What are you doing?" 2 lackeys hastily squeezed through the crowd and rushed over, yelling angrily at Arbor and the others. These 2 people were from Chengdu's Lin family. They had specially accompanied this Miss Anai to Joe City to watch the competition and pass the time. They were considered upper-middle experts in the Lin family, so they were usually treated very well in the Lin family. They were also used to speaking arrogantly. When the little stoic beat up Anai Hanji just now, the little maidservant saw something amiss and immediately stealthily left the crowd to find these 2 people. Thus, when they arrived, they only saw Anai Hanji's weather-beaten and miserable appearance and didn't know what exactly happened. Xiao Mu coldly swept those 2 people a glance. "And who are you?" The two lackeys were discerning people. They saw that although Arbor was only wearing a simple academy white robe, he was far from a normal person's match. They didn't dare to be rash at once and cupped their hands in salute. "We are from Chengdu's Lin family." Seeing that their attitudes were acceptable, Arbor didn't want to argue with them and turned to walk to Mo Lian and Duan Wuqing. "Let's go back." Everyone nodded in agreement. The zombies in this area were more or less cleaned up, and the people who needed to be saved were saved. The group of people planned to return to the city lord's mansion first before discussing the matter. Anai Hanji was supported by a young maidservant. She was so angry that her body trembled. She swayed and said angrily, "Stop her." The two retainers of the Lin family looked at each other and said hesitantly, "Miss and I were alone, so we should," before the words "forget it" could be spat out, and Ai Hanji's twisted face became even more twisted and ugly. "Lin Jun, Lin Xiang, how dare you disobey my orders?" And Ai Hanji shouted angrily, as if she had gone crazy. "What did Patriarch Lin tell the two of you when you came here? You have to listen to me. I'm asking the two of you to kill this woman at all costs." And Ai Hanji shouted, "Otherwise, the two of you don't have to return to the Lin family." Both Lin Jun and Lin Xiang's eyes flashed with a hint of anger. And Ai Hanji's temper was something that no one could stand. Although the two of them were ordered to protect her, they weren't selling themselves as slaves, okay? And Ai Hanji's matter-of-fact attitude was truly unbearable, and they also felt a bit mentally exhausted. Lin Jun restrained his anger and cupped his hands at her. "Miss and I, it's better to have some self-awareness as a person." What a joke. The row of people standing next to the little stoic all had unfathomable cultivations. Chapter 40, 192. Although a few of the sirs merely stood there and looked at them indifferently, Lin Jun felt that the two brothers couldn't discern their cultivation realms at all. Rashly attacking was tantamount to asking for humiliation. They weren't that stupid. Would they go up and ask for a beating? Wasn't it simply hilarious? The round-faced maidservant supported her miss, wiping her tears and heartache. "Miss, how are you, miss?" And Ai Hanji tightly gripped the maidservant's hand, her body trembling in anger. She pointed at the Lin brothers across from her. You. Lin Jun stepped forward with a helpless expression and said, "Miss Anai is injured, and this place is extremely unsafe. How about this? Us brothers will escort Miss Anai back to the capital first." And Ai Hanji shrieked, You're simply audacious." The maidservant also said angrily, "You actually angered Miss to this extent." Lin Jun and Lin Xiang exchanged glances and walked closer to Anai Hanji. They cupped their hands and said, "Miss Anai, please." Anai Hanji forcefully pushed Lin Jun's arm away, her face so contorted that it was about to split open. If she could kill with her gaze right now, Lin Jun and Lin Xiang probably would have been killed countless times by Anai Hanji. The resentment in her heart nearly accumulated into a vast ocean, and she coldly turned to look in Arbor's direction. The latter only glanced back at her indifferently. It was obvious that he didn't care about her at all. Anai Hanji clenched her fists and had just charged forward 2 steps when the maidservant firmly grabbed her hand. Mississippi, the maidservant wasn't stupid. She originally sought out the Lin brothers to help Miss, but now she saw that she couldn't move them. If Miss rushed forward herself, it was no different from walking right into a trap. She was bound to be humiliated by that icy stoic face again. And Ai Hanji secretly gritted her teeth. Although she was unwilling, it was clear that she simply couldn't beat that stoic face. In the end, she could only give up and say with a contorted expression, "Return first." She would think of a countermeasure after returning. This matter couldn't be resolved so easily. She, and Ai Hanji, had suffered such a huge loss, so how could she let the stoic face have it easy by himself? Her venomous gaze stared at Arbor's back, and she shifted her gaze back with difficulty. Just as she was about to leave, she saw the little stoic take 2 steps before abruptly turning her head around, her cold and severe eyes locking onto her figure. "It looks like you still want to continue making trouble for me." The little stoic's voice was endlessly eerie. Hearing this, Everyone present shuddered in unison. Lin Jun knew he was in trouble. He raised his hand and was about to grab an Hanji when he suddenly heard the sound of a whip. Slap. His left hand was slapped back. Originally, I would have spared you this time out of consideration for your esteemed master, Sir Hewan. The little stoic coldly stared at her and said, but an idiot is an idiot. Since you don't care about your life, then die. Everyone was speechless. Arbor thought to himself, who knows what kind of trouble he'll cause in the future if we leave this disaster behind? Recently, things had been very chaotic. She had wholeheartedly wanted to deal with Tian Yun and uncover the rats that Tian Yun had hidden in the various aristocratic families. How could she have the time to deal with a small character like an Hanji? Rather than letting this person endlessly prance around in front of her, it would be better to deal with her once and for all. Seeing that she was about to kill, the two brothers, Lin Jun and Lin Xiang, had no choice but to brace themselves and step forward. They cupped their hands and said, "Please forgive us." And Hanji simply didn't dare to believe that Arbor wasn't done beating her up and wanted to kill her now. Chapter 4193. Her expression twisted as she shrieked, "Do you want to make an enemy out of Medicine King Island? So what if I do?" Arbor looked at her coldly, the vine whip in his hand glowing with a green light. Dark thorns grew and sprouted one by one. And Hanji shouted angrily, "How dare you, ah!" Before she could finish her sentence, she fell to the ground in fright from a flash of cold light. And Hanji looked back and saw a small blue nail nailed to the ground on the left. The weeds on the ground withered and turned into fine powder in less than a second. It was obvious how terrifying the poison on the nail was. Her small fingers curled up as if they were twitching, and her body stiffly shifted backward. Her eyes were filled with terror as she looked at Xiao Mu, who was coldly gazing down at her from a high vantage point. At this moment, she suddenly felt like death was closing in. Why was she in such a sorry state? Lin Jun was just about to rush forward when Arbor's vine whip whipped him back. "The two of you better mind your own business," Mo Lien said coldly. Following the clanging of swords leaving their sheaths, Lin Jun and Lin Xiang silently looked at each other. Looking at the dozens of black-clothed youths surrounding them, they could only take 2 steps back. It wasn't that they didn't want to help Miss and Hanji, but the other side had too many people. They couldn't help even if they wanted to. Arbor looked coldly at the kneeling and Hanji for a long time before saying faintly, "Kill her." She had no interest in being entangled with her any longer. Rather than having to deal with this woman in the future, it was easier to just kill her and end it all. The hatred in the other party's eyes couldn't be ignored. If she kept this hatred and allowed it to grow, who knew what would happen in the future? The two accompanying black-clothed youths nodded and leaped up, holding their swords as they walked in front of Hanji. She heard a panting voice calling out anxiously, "Please, please have mercy on me. Crown Princess, Your Highness the Crown Prince. Please, please show mercy." A white-bearded, white-haired, green-robed elder hurriedly squeezed through the crowd and hurriedly bowed to Mo Lien and Arbor. Arbor was startled. His expression was a little complicated as he dodged to the side. He did not accept his greeting. Hewan said anxiously, "My disciple is willful and reckless and has a willful temperament. It's all my fault for not being strict enough in my daily supervision. This old man is willing to accept the punishment on behalf of my disciple. Please forgive me, Master." And Hanji stamped her feet and cried out anxiously, "Shut up." Hewan turned his head and glared at her with an expression that said, "I'll deal with you later." Looking at his anxious expression, Arbor's eyes rippled as if 2 tiny ripples had appeared in the depths of his pupils. Mo Lien had been looking down at Jojo the whole time. When she saw her expression, she couldn't help but wonder what was on her mind. Jojo's originally cold expression seemed to have softened quite a bit. Arbor's thoughts had drifted far away, as if he had returned to his childhood. That day, a friend of the old sect masters brought his grandson to visit. In the end, The little stoic got into a fight with this stinky brat when the old sect master's friend saw his grandson beaten black and blue, looking like he had suffered a loss. He was instantly enraged and wanted to punish her. At that time, Murong-sun also stood in front of him with a grin like this and blocked that person's hand with a wave of her hand. It's this peak master's fault for not being strict enough with my disciples. I'm the one who should be punished. Why did you hit my disciple? Jojo? Jojo. Chapter 4194. When Mo Lien saw her standing there silently with glittering eyes, he couldn't help but feel a bit anxious. Thinking that she was bewitched again, he hastily shook her body. On the side, young Master Omega Kotoku harumphed coldly. Eldest Chin involuntarily turned his head to look at him. What is it? You think she's bewitched all day long, but you don't help her completely eradicate it. Young Master Omega Kotoku sneered. Something will happen sooner or later. Eldest Chin sighed and unhurriedly waved the folding fan in his hand. You can't be too hasty with this kind of thing, right? Could it be that second brother knows why the little stoic is constantly bewitched? When the little stoic really flared up, she really didn't look like a living person. Her eyes were lifeless, and it really made people feel a bit uncomfortable just looking at her. Young Master Omega Kotoku abruptly turned his head and coldly spat out 2 words from between his teeth. I don't know. Jojo. Mo Lien shook the little fellow, causing her to recover from her daze. Raising her head to glance at him, the little stoic meaningfully revealed 2 tiny teeth. I'm fine, she said softly and turned to look at the group of men in black waiting with swords in hand, waiting to act on orders. She shook her head and said, let them go. This time, even eldest young Master Chin couldn't help but look at her strangely. This little stoic, she wasn't someone who would casually waver. Just as he was about to say something, he saw Arbor waving his hand and already leading Mo Lien away. Ao, Yi, and the others naturally sheathed their swords and hastily followed. Mo Lien looked back and coldly gazed at the woman standing there with trembling legs and a half-bent waist. Arbor grabbed his hand at once and pulled him back. She looked up at her husband and lightly shook her head. Mo Lien raised his sword-like eyebrows and nodded reluctantly. And Hanji didn't know that she had just rolled around in a sea of fire. How could the little stoic not know the Crown Prince's thoughts? She was soft-hearted, but that didn't mean that the Crown Prince would be soft-hearted. The Crown Prince would often deal with the aftermath, including an Hanji, who might cause trouble. She was definitely within the Crown Prince's dangerous range. Jojo, what did you see just now? Mo Lien asked softly. Arbor was silent for a moment before quietly saying, I saw Murong-sun. I even saw the old sect master squatting at the side with his palm leaf fan, looking like he was watching a good show as he called out, Sun, don't fight with sect master Zhao. Old man Zhao, you bastard. How can you still be so narrow-minded after so many years? You're hitting my disciple. My disciple, ouch. Sun, don't hit old Zhao. His old bones can't withstand your torment. Mo Lien pulled the little fellow into her embrace and lightly patted her back. She lowered her head and smiled at her. We haven't returned to the Holy Water sect for a long time. Let's turn back and take a look. If my master was still alive, I definitely wouldn't be like Miss and cause trouble for my master everywhere, Arbor said in a low voice. My Jojo is the most sensible. Arbor nodded. I'm very obedient. When Peak Master Morong wakes up, we'll accompany her to tour the mountains and rivers of the Divine Province. What's wrong with that? The little stoic's eyes instantly brightened, as if a gorgeous color had been injected into them. Ming Province's Crown Prince and the others are coming over, someone shouted. Everyone looked up and saw Ming Yasi and his group quickly walking over while escorting over 1,000 old, weak, and sick people. Ming Yasi raised his brows when he saw the little stoic. Why are your eyes red? Chapter 4195. Xiao Mu was unwilling to acknowledge him and turned her small head away at the first instance. It's none of your business. Mo Lien retorted in annoyance. She pulled her wifey and headed toward the city lord manor. Yasi harumphed and turned to catch up with them. Did you make her angry? Shut up. Emolian turned around to glare at him. She didn't want to talk to him, but she couldn't help but raise her brows when she saw the old, weak, sick, and disabled following behind him. We've already checked their bodies. Can you be sure they haven't been poisoned? When the time came, they would have to evacuate the rest of the people. If there were some uncontrollable people in the group who could mutate and go on a rampage at any time, things would be a little difficult. After all, they couldn't keep an eye on so many people along the way. It was inevitable that they would overlook something. Once a riot broke out, it would only affect the lowest rung of society, the ordinary people with no cultivation at all. Ming Yasi also wasn't willing to talk to Emolian, so he harumphed and retorted, "Who can guarantee that? We can only take things one step at a time. I have a kind of medicinal liquid here." Arbor suddenly spoke up. "You can try it." Yasi turned to look at her, his eyes brightening. "You're talking to me?" Emolian chuckled at that person and pulled Arbor away. She asked in a low voice, "What do we need to prepare?" 15 minutes later, everyone who had been brought back stood in front of the city lord manor. There were more than 10,000 commoners, and all of them looked exhausted. Yasi ordered them to line up in a square formation. More than 10 wash basins were arranged neatly in front of them. The wash basins were filled with a green medicinal liquid that looked very clear and bright, with a gentle color. "Now, everyone in the first row, come forward and wash your hands in the wash basins." The row of people walked forward nervously and squatted down to put their hands in the wash basins. They felt a gentle stream of water pass through their palms, and they couldn't help but feel energized. In less than 2 seconds, Mayas had them line up behind him. Although the onlookers didn't know what was going on, they vaguely understood that as long as nothing happened when they washed their hands, they could stand behind these practitioners and go to a safe place. Everyone came forward with a trace of panic and fear, and then were brought back to Arbor and the others in groups in high spirits and rearranged in a square formation. Suddenly, in the third basin, the originally light green medicinal liquid suddenly boiled up, revealing a trace of a strange black color. The faces of the guards on both sides suddenly changed as they pulled out the sharp blades in their hands. The old woman squatting in front of the basin was obviously shocked by their actions. She knelt on the ground and held a 5- or 6-year-old child tightly in one hand. The child was so frightened that he immediately burst into tears. Arbor quickly walked over and waved his hand to dismiss the 2 guards with swords and sabers. His eyes were filled with complex emotions as he stared at the old woman before him. "Isolate him first." The old woman looked back at him in panic and exclaimed, "What are you doing? You are bullying the good people." Arbor shook his head slightly and said faintly, "It's not her. It's that child." Everyone stilled when they heard this. Chapter 4196. The old woman grew even more flustered as she hugged her grandson tightly. She glared furiously at Arbor. What are you trying to do?" Arbor stared at her coldly for a good while before sighing softly. If this child isn't suppressed with medicine soon, he'll turn into a zombie in less than an hour. When the time comes, who will bear the consequences? Granny, you hid your grandson in the crowd. You're irresponsible to yourself, and you're equally irresponsible to others. The old woman shuddered. She wanted to speak, but when she met Arbor's cold gaze, she shrank back. But soon, she grabbed her grandson's arm again. She stared at Ao Yi and his men in horror and shouted, "Don't come here. You can't kill my grandson. He's still young. He's still young. You can't." This old woman. Ming Yasi's eyes flashed with impatience as he roared, "No one here wants to kill your grandson. Didn't you hear me just now? If this child of yours isn't suppressed by medicine, he'll mutate." The old woman heard clearly this time. She looked at Arbor's group with trembling eyes. "Why, you can really save my grandson?" Ming Yasi didn't seem to want to answer the old woman's superfluous question. He merely sneered and waved his hand to have the old woman and child carried away. Then he said coldly, "I hope you won't waste our time. I'm sure anyone with eyes can see what the situation is like right now. I hope those of you who have been lightly injured or bitten by zombies will step forward on your own accord. As soon as these words came out, many people's faces showed slight panic. Ming Yasi said, "The apothecaries in the group can suppress the zombie poison in some of you. If you don't step forward now, don't blame us for treating you as despicable and shameless people who deliberately hid the truth. We'll throw you out here for good." When he said this, everyone became even more nervous. In the subsequent tests, everyone was extremely cautious. Their hands touched the surface of the water, and they didn't dare to stay there for long. They immediately withdrew their hands. Ming Yasi couldn't resist using his eyes to size up the little stoic standing not far away, and a strange look appeared in the depths of his eyes. "You can measure it so quickly?" Arbor glanced at him, nodded, and turned to tug at her husband's hand. Mo Lien threw a cold glance at Ming Yasi and said indifferently, "I'll leave this place to you." What did he mean by handing it over to him? Ming Yasi's eyes turned fierce as he took a few steps forward. He was about to argue with Mo Lien again when he heard a cry of alarm from the side. "Your Highness, this is bad. This man is starting to mutate." Dark Yas turned his head and saw that a small area in front of him had started to become chaotic. His gaze turned even colder as he reprimanded angrily. "What are you all standing there for? Hurry up and disperse them. Don't panic. Continue to test the remaining people with the liquid. Don't try to fish in troubled waters." In the end, Divine Province and Ming Province each brought back 2,000 or so people from Joe City in batches. The remaining people would be brought back by the 4 great cities for consumption. Arbor and Mo Lien didn't bring so many people back to the capital. Instead, they sent other people to settle down these miserable commoners. The duo arrived at the capital a day later. Chapter 40-197. The first news he received was that Empress Dowager Chen, who had gone to Mount Heaven Saint to fast and pray, had been carried back. Yes, she was carried back. It was said that this old lady began to fall ill as soon as she arrived at Mount Heaven Saint. After a serious illness, her entire body was emaciated, as if she could be blown away by the wind. She was very miserable and pitiful. King Jianping submitted a memorial, saying in a tearful voice that he must bring back the Empress Dowager to show his filial piety. He said that the Empress Dowager was old. If she lived in the mausoleum all year round, she would inevitably be contaminated with the aura of death, which was naturally not good for her body. Moreover, from ancient times until now, Jianping had done his homework. He had listed countless acts of filial piety by emperors, generals, and ministers, and earnestly persuaded Mo Luxing to be filial and conform to the way of the emperor. Thus, Mo Luxing couldn't bear the annoyance and really brought the old lady back. But once he brought her back, Mo Luxing directly sent the old lady to King Jianping's residence, asking King Jianping to take good care of the Empress Dowager on his behalf. King Jianping, who had secretly received a large sum of money from Empress Dowager Chen and was counting the spirit coins happily, was a little dumbfounded on the spot. Indeed, he had said that in the way of filial piety, he should take good care of the Empress Dowager. He had even written a long speech in front of His Majesty. But damn, he had never said that he wanted to bring Empress Dowager Chen back to live at his residence. He wasn't someone who had nothing to do and liked to court death as much as he liked. What kind of good days could there be if he brought Empress Dowager Chen, this great Buddha, into his residence? He didn't expect that he actually found himself an old lady to take care of at home. Don't you think His Majesty is a fraud? As for the second news that Arbor and Mo Lien received, on the second day after all of them withdrew from Joe City was occupied by an unknown force. Now, the entire city was filled with rotting corpse puppets. They were like the guards of this city, pacing back and forth, letting out sensational roars from time to time. Arbor was only silent for a moment before saying, "Tianyun has a base on the surface. It will be slightly more convenient for us to deal with it in the future." Mo Lien smiled and nodded. "Don't worry about this. Running back and forth is torturous. Let's rest for today. If there's anything, we can talk about it tomorrow. Arbor looked at her and nodded. Bathe together? Arbor nodded again. Emo Lien's eyes lit up when he heard this. He stepped forward and hugged his wife. Let's go. The next day, the crown prince was summoned to the imperial study by His Majesty early in the morning. The father and son spent the whole morning talking about Joe City. We can only do this for now, Emo Lusheng said with a frown. In the past, Tianyun was in the dark while we were in the light. We were always on the defensive. Emo Lusheng patted Emo Lien's shoulder and said in a low voice, now that they are in the open, it will be easier to deal with them in the future. As the two of them were talking, a young eunuch reported, Your Majesty, Your Highness the Crown Prince. The Crown Princess sent someone to inform the Crown Prince that she has been invited to King Jianpei's mansion. Emo Lusheng couldn't help but twitch his mouth, thinking, is Jianpei seeking death again? He turned back to look at his son. Sure enough, he saw that the latter's handsome face was already covered with dark clouds. He hurriedly said, why don't you go back and take a look first? Emo Lien naturally had to go back. She walked out with a sullen face, turning a deaf ear to the great emperor's muttering, Don't scare your little uncle. Chapter 40-198. She scared the old king of Jianpei? Of course he was scared. When he heard a servant report that the crown princess's carriage had already arrived at the entrance, the old king of Jianpei's hand trembled, and the half-cup of hot tea directly spilled onto the ground. Fuck, why would this great Buddha suddenly grace his king of Jianpei's estate with her presence? It wasn't that he was a coward, but he had suffered at the hands of this little ancestor time and time again. After being tricked by her, he wouldn't seek abuse for no reason. The old king of Jianpei practically roared, Who invited her here? The servant replied with trepidation, Her Majesty the Empress Dowager said that she wants to see Her Majesty the Crown Princess. The old king of Jianpei slapped his forehead, instantly looking like he was about to faint. He wanted to say something, but a cold and clear voice sounded by his ear. What? Does the king of Jianpei not welcome this crown princess? The old king of Jianpei's lips trembled. He really wanted to retort, So, what if I don't welcome you? But when he opened his mouth, a flattering voice that even he found hard to believe came out. Haha, how could that be? The crown princess has graced us with her presence. My humble abode shines with light. My humble abode shines with light. Arbor glanced at him, then his gaze landed on Emo Cohen, who was sitting upright and kneeling beside a small table with a teacup in his hands. How have you been, king of Jianpei's heir? Emo Cohen, king of Jianpei's heir, revealed a smile that he believed to be handsome and incomparably confident and at ease. He nodded and said, Thank you for your concern, Crown Princess. Emo Cohen has been doing well recently. The little Crown Princess snorted coldly. She turned around and saw a servant girl dressed in a green servant's uniform hastily crossing the hall to greet them. Greetings, Crown Princess. Greetings, Your Highness and the heir. Your Highness, this servant is here on Her Majesty the Empress Dowager's order to invite the Crown Princess to the small garden. The old king of Jianpei forcefully restrained his expression that was about to change and nodded calmly. May I know why the Empress Dowager summoned the Crown Princess? The little girl lowered her head and said very appropriately, The Empress Dowager didn't say, so we didn't dare to ask. At this moment, the old king of Jianpei wished he could whip the old woman and throw her into a frying pan. If you want to cause trouble for the Crown Princess, why do you have to cause trouble in my mansion? Just how bored must you be to do something like this? The little Crown Princess stared deeply at the little girl who was bowing in front of her. After a while, the girl felt cold sweat dripping down her forehead. The Crown Princess suddenly said softly, Lead the way. The moment she opened her mouth, the little girl felt the pressure on her suddenly disappear. She couldn't help but let out a long sigh. She didn't dare to act rashly and bowed respectfully in front of Arbor. Crown Princess, please. When he turned around and led the little crown princess out the door, the little girl couldn't help but clench her fists under her sleeves and quicken her pace nervously. After a while, the entire hall was filled with a deathly stillness. The maids and servants stood on both sides with lowered eyes. They naturally didn't dare to make a sound at this time to anger their master. The old king of Giant Pain finally clapped his hands angrily. "What are you still standing there for? Go to the Eastern Palace and inform His Highness the Crown Prince. That brat better not think that I invited his wife. He didn't want to experience the virtues of those two black-bellied bastards again." Turning to look at Imo Cohen, who was still kneeling in front of the table and unmoving like a mountain, the king of Giant Pain couldn't help but feel angry. "What are you still sitting there for? Hurry up and scram into the palace to find your elder brother." "Ooh, Royal Father, my legs are weak." Royal Father couldn't tell that he wasn't kneeling, but directly kneeling. "I've been busy these 2 days, and I'm not in good spirits." Chapter 4199. Imo Cohen was at a loss for words, feeling extremely aggrieved. Did she think he wanted to do this? He truly felt fearful for no reason after seeing the little crown princess. It was as if someone had struck the depths of his soul, and he inexplicably ordered his body to know its place. Boo-hoo. He didn't want to be so cowardly either, but what could he do? From what he could see, his old father didn't seem to be able to be tough with that person either. The old king of Giant Pain was like a bird startled by the twang of a bow. He anxiously stomped his feet and pointed at the 2 page boys. "Why aren't you helping the heir up? Ah, Cohen, hurry into the palace and explain this matter to your elder brother. Explain it clearly." Of course, this matter had to be explained clearly. If the crown prince misunderstood and thought that their king of Giant Pain's mansion didn't like the crown princess and invited her over to cause trouble, wouldn't that be an undeserved calamity? Imo Cohen's face was bitter, and his expression was somewhat conflicted. "Royal Father, can I not go?" Haha, his old father himself was afraid of the crown prince, so he sent his son. However, his son, Imo Cohen, also felt fearful when he saw the crown prince for no reason. It would be best if they didn't meet if they could. Imo Cohen looked at the old king of Giant Pain, his expression saying, "Don't screw your son over." The old king of Giant Pain was furious, and he kicked his son down the steps from the small table. Imo Cohen's face was bitter as he scrambled toward the door. Seeing that his old father was about to kick him again, he hurriedly shouted, I'll go. Can I go?" The old king of Giant Pain shouted in exasperation, "Hurry up and prepare the carriage for the heir. Hurry up." He kicked his son's butt again, kicking Imo Cohen out of the central room. Imo Cohen crawled up from the ground and fled outside like a fleeing rabbit. He ran out in tears, feeling aggrieved and pitiful. While the king of Giant Pain's mansion was in a state of chaos, the little crown princess followed the steps in the back garden of the king of Giant Pain's mansion under the guidance of a maid. As the late emperor's youngest son, the king of Giant Pain was used to complaining about being poor and extorting benefits in front of his older brothers. Along the way to King Giant Pain's mansion, there were clusters of flowers and brocade, richly ornamented beams and painted rafters, and golden-colored glazed roofs that shone brightly under the sunlight. How could he be as poor as the old prince of Giant Pain, who cried outside? The little girl who was leading the way had her neck shrunk and her back arched, looking very cautious. Although she looked thin and small, her speed was not slow. Along the way, Arbor's lips were filled with mockery. She wanted to see what kind of tricks this Empress Dowager Chun had up her sleeves after finally coming back from Mount Heaven Saint. She was not Lien's father. A cold light flashed in Arbor's eyes, revealing a bit of killing intent. She had already tolerated the Empress Dowager, who disliked her in every way and always wanted to find trouble with her. Her patience had run out. The little girl in front of him suddenly stopped in her tracks and looked around. She revealed a bewildered expression at the right moment. There were a few drops of sweat on her forehead, which glowed faintly under the faint sunlight. "My apologies," the little girl said with trepidation. Her Majesty the Empress Dowager was indeed here before. Now she should have returned to her bedchamber. Why don't the Crown Princess wait here for a moment? I will go to Her Majesty the Empress Dowager's residence to invite her. Arbor did not hesitate to fling a vine whip over and wrap it around the girl's waist. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.